Mayor Murphy's not with us.
I believe so.
And
Chairman Norris is not.
okay, all right, thank you. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Barrett, do we have any individuals for call to audience?
Mr. Chair, there are no individuals who have called in for the PAG Regional Council.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to item 4, which is the meeting summary or a motion. Okay, so I have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay. Second. All right. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Going to item 5, consent agenda. Any items for discussion? I had one question regarding the Highway User Revenue Fund. It showed a fairly strong dip in April. Was there any particular reason for that?
Thank you for asking, Mr. Chair. And actually, David looked into it. There was a correction that ADOT made, and he can add to that.
Yes, there was one of the gas stations here forgot to report, or there was a omission in the report of that. So there should be another, we've since corrected that in our files, but there will be another 3.5 million gallons of gas sold that will raise that trend up to where it should be, just under 13%.
Okay. And that's one gas station that
Yes.
represents one gas station?
Probably one of the more popular ones, Costco.
I'm gonna say that's some gas station. Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions for items on the consent agenda? If not, this was okay. Information, thank you. We'll go to item 6. Supervisor Scott, this is the Arizona Heroes Memorial presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm very pleased to recognize in the audience somebody who we probably all know through his various pursuits of leadership in our community, former State Representative Steve Huffman, because Representative Huffman was the gentleman who connected me with our guest today, Lisa Hopper. Lisa is the executive director of the Arizona Heroes Memorial Foundation. And you might also know her from her former role as the executive director of World Care, where she had a tremendous amount of success in moving that organization forward in service to our community. And I know, Mayor Winfield, that you and everybody else in Oro Valley are also connected with the Arizona Heroes Memorial Project, because it is planned for Naranja Park within your jurisdiction. So very pleased to have Ms. Hopper here. She wants to know if there's anything that our various jurisdictions can do to support her project moving forward.
All right, Ms. Hopper, the floor is yours. The floor is yours.
I'm sorry, sir.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Just a brief little video that we're going to play.
What does it mean to serve your country, to sacrifice for your community, to save a life? It means everything. The Arizona Heroes Memorial is being built not just to honor those brave men and women of the past, but to educate and inspire those of the future. Find out more at azheroesmemorial.org today.
So this is just a little brief thing as far as I first and foremost want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and present to you today. I know we have exactly 5 minutes, and I will make sure that I stay within that strict talking frame. We do have, I do have a PowerPoint presentation. And so one of the things that this memorial has been in play for about 5 years. And due to COVID, we had a lot of issues because everybody went through it. Now we have resurrected it. We have rebranded it because we've also added healthcare workers. It's active, active military, veterans, first responders, and healthcare workers. And so that represents a lot of different people. I'm sorry? Oh. Oh, looky there. Our history is not there to be judged, but it's there to learn from. And so what we mean by that is, there we go. Oh, this goes fast. I'm sorry. Okay, so now we go the other direction. I apologize. So there's something about being one of a kind. This memorial is actually going to be on 2.5 acres of land. It represents over 500,000 people in this region of Southern Arizona. And this is a regional project. And that's what I really want to press today. It's what's really important. It actually has, it represents 500,000 people just in Southern Arizona, but also 1.5 million people in the state of Arizona. And so recognizing that, I feel that it has a tremendous level of draw for the communities surrounding the memorial. And that's a picture of the memorial there. The vision is this right here. We have already completed pre-construction of phase 1, and that has provided over $1 million in funding and sponsorship. This will have 8 walls. If you see up here, we have 8 walls. We have an amphitheater that will allow us to do presentations. It will be lit up all the time. We will have 3 flags, which are here. It will be the state of Arizona, the United States flag, and the MIA POW flag. We'll also have on this side, where I'm standing in the parking lot actually, because we didn't put that on here. It'll have a parking lot and it'll have handicap section as well. So this amphitheater is really important because one of the reasons that we really want to have a living memorial is to make sure that the education of our community continues to grow and that our history is not lost. That's one of the issues that we have had, I feel, over the years, is that we need to have a place to recognize not just the past, but the present and future of all of these entities that we're going to be serving right here at this memorial. So in the center is a obelisk. It's a 24-foot obelisk that has a star on one side and it has words on the other. That will be in the center along the foundational area of pavers, which has a pathway of heroes that goes all the way around. And it represents the Army, Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, the National Guard, the Coast Guard. It also represents public health and first responders and healthcare workers and NOAA. So what is important is that it is so unique to the state. It's so unique to this region in the fact that there is nothing like it west of Mississippi. You've got to be proud of that. And it will attract a lot of people. Always, I came from Washington, D.C. as well. And once they built it, people come. And it's our time to build. So one of the things is that again, what I said before was we have already put in over $1 million of funding and resources into this project. To move it forward, we're asking for your support in collectively pulling together $1.7 million so we can get this built. It's basically all the structural things are complete. We are ready to rock and roll in getting this built. And I know that every town is going to be affected by this memorial, both not only just for the people that it represents, the people that are in your communities, but also the people and the children that it's going to serve in the future. Because making sure that every child that walks by this is represented, they're not going to forget their history, and that this is something they can be very proud of. So This is what we're asking today. I have packets in front of you that have the memorial. It has a budget there. It also has the proposal in there for PAG alone. We are also aggressively going after many other funds too, but we lost 2.5 years, and as well as everybody else. And so we also lost several of our major contributors because their businesses closed during COVID. And so we really are a little bit behind on that. And so we wanted to make sure that we give you an opportunity. If you support this PAG, everybody else is going to support it as well, because you're going to be behind it. And it represents, this is your legacy. You know, we want you to embrace that legacy. And during your time of office, your time in the communities, that'll make the difference for generations to come. Thank you. I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to thank you. I already discussed this project with our county administrator. For all of our constituents.
And I'll certainly keep all of you updated as to what action we take as Pima County, but I'd certainly encourage all of you to follow up with your colleagues and your staffs to see how your jurisdictions could be of help to Ms. Hopper and the proposed memorial. And then General Maxwell, if you had any suggestions as to where she might follow up at the state level, that of course would be appreciated as well.
I don't know if I've got any suggestions right off the top of my head, but first off, I want to say thank you to Lisa K. Steve. Everybody that's on your team's done an incredible job. This program did start several years ago, and it's been a long effort, to say the least. Through the pandemic, made some big stumbling blocks, or we can look at as opportunities to overcome. And but it did make the project more difficult. The thing is that I'd like to say is thank you to you and your team. Thank you for providing the opportunity. It's not just about a place to go, although I cannot begin to overemphasize that it is a place to go, because it's a place for people to go to reflect, to unwind. Sometimes if they're struggling, they want to go and see and recognize that people are there supporting them. It is, you see it all over the U.S. and all over Arizona, as having places like this for the men and women who serve our community in almost any fashion, or almost sometimes more importantly, the families that allow and help them support them in their service to go and reflect makes a big deal. Whether it's, you know, the VA cemetery in Marana is a place that's very close to my heart as well. And it's a place where folks can go have some solace and some time to reflect. It's going to take community effort. It's going to take organizational effort to get it done. You know, I just suggest that everybody spread the word as much as you possibly can. There's no gift that's too small or too large, and making it happen. And again, I appreciate all you're doing to make this become a reality. And I'm very blessed to be an Oro Valley resident as well. So it'll be around the corner. I'm looking forward to watching it closely.
My card is in your packets as well, and if there's anybody or anything that you can do to make this trip, we appreciate it.
Mayor Romero has a question.
More commentary than question. Thank you, Lisa, for bringing this item to our attention, and Supervisor Scott for sharing it with us as the sister of an Army veteran, first Gulf War, and the aunt of active Army private. I'm personally very moved by this opportunity for the entire region. I would venture to say that if you are working with the town of Oro Valley, which Mayor Winfield has indicated that you are, that it would be a wonderful idea to be able to, one, this involve the state, but also our federal delegation. I know that the senators, both Sinema and Kelly, would be interested, and there are member-directed funds available every year when it's budget season. I don't know if it's too late now, but I know that the city of Tucson works hand in hand with Senators Kelly and Sinema in our congressional delegation, where they could put aside funds to be able to help build these types of community projects. So I agree with Ted that not just community, but our veterans, our active duty, our public safety personnel, our first responders, and our families sometimes need a place to be able to go reflect and feel as though the community is paying attention to their sacrifices. So that's what I would recommend, that you try and find, whether it's member directed funds or other possible funds in the federal government for investments like these.
Well, I'm hoping that because it's not just Coral Valley, it is regional. This is
Mhm.
public-private partnership with the communities around. It's recognized, Coral Valley has allocated the land, and so we're looking to recognize that, just get it built, and hopefully everyone here will have an opportunity. I too am a veteran, so thank you.
It was my brother's service, but all of the family feels it.
You're all in
All
it,
of the family feels it.
Yeah, the whole entire family.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that you find it in your heart, and any connections that you can get us to, greatly appreciated. I don't want this to be the last day I see everybody. So thank you for your time. Is there any other questions?
Supervisor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Hopper, one of the things that I was thinking, and I didn't mention this when we had our initial meeting with Representative Huffman, but just came to me now, that because of the educative role that the memorial will play for school children in this area, there might be value in contacting some of the foundations that serve our local K-12 districts, because they might be interested in lending their support as well.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, we have quite a large list. But no stone unturned. I mean, we really feel that it's just going to be an incredibly overwhelming environment once it's built. So thank you for your
Thank you.
support, and we look forward to
Thank you, Ms. Hopper. We
Thank
appreciate your presentation. Thank you, Supervisor Scott, for putting this on the agenda. I also appreciate you acknowledging that the town of Oro Valley contributed the 2.5 acres for the memorial. We're also going to be contributing in terms of providing access and utilities to the memorial as part of some other development at Naranjo Park. And I'll visit with my colleagues and the town manager to see how we can further support this project. So thank you.
I think one extra thing is that during the grading process, because of certain organizations that are there, we are in conversation as well to try to get the grading done also. And so, again, sponsorships are just as important as funding as well.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. We'll go to item 7, Mr. Barrett. This is the 2022 PAG Title 6 implementation plan.
Members of the council, the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act requires that federally funded programs and activities be free of discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin. PAG's Title VI implementation plan outlines the manner in which PAG ensures that its activities comply with Title VI requirements. Please note that PAG does not implement projects. So its Title VI plan will do things differently than the Title VI plans from agencies that do implement projects. For example, the PAG Title VI plan outlines how disparate impact is detected on the entire slate of plan projects rather than on how to mitigate such impacts on an individual project level. PAG is required to update the implementation plan annually, and PAG also maintains a non-discrimination policy and a limited English proficiency plan, or the LEP plan. The LEP plan is also updated annually with current demographic information obtained from the Census Office. ADOT Civil Rights Office has reviewed and approved these 3 documents, and the next step in the process is approval by the Regional Council. I can answer any questions you might have about the PAG Title VI plan.
Mayor Romero.
Thank you so much. You know, I was looking through my material, looking at the Title VI plan, and last year we brought up the Title VI plan before. I had some questions about environmental justice and equity and what Title VI can do for the Pima Association of Governments. And as I look through this year's Title VI implementation plan, I continue to have questions about how we at PAG are addressing inequities in our community when it comes to infrastructure investment and access to transit. So what I don't understand, and maybe you can clarify for me, what is the goal of the PAG's Title VI plan and why we create it?
The PAG Title VI plan is a legal document which describes how PAG meets its legal obligations to comply with the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. It is not a policy implementation plan. It is a legal compliance plan.
Okay. I guess my belief is that our region could be better positioned for federal infrastructure opportunities if we can demonstrate that our Title VI plan is reflective of our region's goals for livability and equity. Now, I understand that this particular plan is to address how PAG does not discriminate, or it's a legal document that we have. But I believe instinctively that part of what this implementation plan should be, or maybe there is another area where we could address Title VI needs and what Title VI plan should be. In other words, I believe our region will be better positioned if we have an implementation plan, not just an explanation of what we do to not discriminate. So I know that this plan addressed travel time as part of livability, but I think that travel time is not the only metric in a community or a region. So for example, other metrics could possibly be safety, air quality, ability to get around without having to rely on a car, surface temperature, and other criteria could be included to better answer the disparate impact question that Title VI asks PAG to do. So I also don't see a definition of environmental justice in the document. It just says, you know, we have to address environmental justice and there's a way to report it. I don't see how PAG delivers its infrastructure and programming to address the needs of those communities, low income, communities of color, communities with disability issues. So this document may meet the bare bone criteria and requirement, but it's not reflective of the way our region's residents have experienced access, investments, or disinvestments in infrastructure equitably. So I think we could do better with this particular plan. I think that we're answering the most bare bones of questions that the federal government has us answer. But I believe that it could do much better work in terms of putting together a Title VI plan where we could have a strategic plan of investment to deal with the communities historically disinvested in. And I'm not just talking about the city of Tucson. I am inclusive of the city of South Tucson, of the Pascuayaqui tribe, and of the Tohono O'odham Nation, and surrounding communities, by the way, because this is also about low-income communities that don't have access to transit or infrastructure for them to move about in our community. So this is not for you to answer. This is much more of a reflection of what I see, and still at a point where I don't feel that as a metropolitan planning organization, we're doing that what we should be doing to advance our region in terms of equity and investment in underinvested communities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other comments? Mayor Honey?
I think we have the same discussion every year when Title VI comes up. It's
For
not,
the past 2 years, to be fair.
but I concur with Mayor Romero on a lot of the things she is saying. I don't know if putting it in the plan is what we need to do. Really, Title VI, and I'm speaking as a person, I have people of color, both Black and Hispanic in my family, and gay people in my family, and I want to recognize all those people. But I think we can complicate this too much. We are meeting criteria to be available for federal grants and monies. And I think if we make the plan too expansive, it convolutes it to the point it makes it difficult for us to function. And I'm not against what you're saying, but I really think what we're just doing here is say we will comply with Title VI, and we can discuss the other issues maybe in a different format or something, just as a organization. So I think what we do with Title VI is say we will comply with ethnicity, skin color, and those things, which is the bare basics from the federals. And if we do an extensive, I don't know if this is necessarily where we need to put it. That's just a personal thing.
Other comments, questions for Mr. Barrett? So Mr. Barrett, the development of this plan, how are the various jurisdictions, do they have any involvement in the development of this plan? Do you seek input from the various jurisdictions, or what's the process look like?
No, there is, in recent years, there has been no jurisdictional input. It's an administrative document that is updated on an annual basis.
General Maxwell?
This is an administrative document that fills a requirement for PAG to establish that we're going to comply with Title VI. So I guess the question I would have is, are there other associations of government that either have an additional document that talks about their goals and objectives in the categories to support Title VI, or are there other ones that actually have much thicker plans that go into the kind of some of the details that Mayor Romero was talking about? And not necessarily expecting an answer today, but maybe something that would be good at some point to come back and talk to us about the differences, because then it gives the opportunity to look at just to what Mayor Honey alluded to is we are going to not just comply with Title VI. We are going to take all those things into consideration, but how do we show the public that we do? It's not this planet, maybe in something else, but I'd be really curious if there were other association of governments that have done so inside this plan instead of doing what, to me, is the thing you want to do, is make sure the federal government understands you're complying.
As far as the question about whether other COGs and MPOs have a separate plan for diversity and equity issues, I do not know that. I would have to research that. But last year, after the Title VI agenda item, I did look at some other best practices from other COGS and MPOs. I looked at MAG's Title VI plan. I looked outside this state. I looked at the Colorado Springs, their association is called the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. I looked at their Title VI plan just to kind of gauge whether the PAG Title VI plan was on the same level, same magnitude. And there were a few minor adjustments that we made to the PAG Title VI plan based on that survey. But this is, yeah, it is fairly standard without those comparisons.
Chair, I appreciate that answer because that's, again, some of these things, when you're working in the system, you want to do them clean, crisp, and move on. So I appreciate you looking into that after last.
Right. If I may, Mr. Chair.
Remember.
I think, and I appreciate your answer on a little bit of a survey that you did looked outside of what we do. There are other planning organizations throughout the country that use the opportunity of Title VI to be able to expand and do more of a strategic plan. I think the responsibility in PAG would be to be able to not just comply with the bare bones or the bare minimum, but especially now, right, that we are living in a time where there is historic investments from the federal government coming down to states and to planning organizations and to jurisdictions throughout the country. We could be better positioned as a planning organization to be able to say, we comply with Title VI, and we are also looking at how to cure that disparate impact in terms of infrastructure investment in low-income communities and other communities that we require to report on. So maybe it is a conversation that we need to have outside of the Title VI of this particular item, because we should be lining ourselves as a planning organization for a region to plan and strategize on how to take advantage of the Justice 40 funds that the federal government has made available through the bipartisan infrastructure law, and that will be using the Justice 40 ethic for the Infrastructure Reduction Act as well. And so, you know, just as a preparation, I guess, to do more than what is just the bare minimum. I think we could do better as an organization.
Mr. Morgini, could you?
I want to add to David's comment there. So as you mentioned, coordination with ADOT, the items through the process. ADOT applies the same process to all FBOs within.
Any other discussion? Supervisor?
I was intrigued, Mayor Monroe, with what you just said about potential funding available through the Justice 40 program and the infrastructure bill. Could we get some kind of staff report, staff research and report to us on exactly what we might be able to benefit from as an MPO from that legislation? That would be really helpful.
Sure. All David has been updating you all on new. So there are a lot of different programs that are introducing funding opportunities. We'd be happy to bring that back again and provide you more details. At the time when we provided the presentation, there weren't enough details. I think now we're getting to the point that those details are starting to roll in, so we'll have more information, and we'll work with David and the team and bring that back to you.
Thank you.
Any other further? Okay, recognizing that the what's been presented may not be perfect, but nevertheless fulfills the requirements, and we can improve going into the future. We are asked to adopt this. Is there a motion to adopt?
I move to adopt.
Motion by second by Supervisor Scott. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Here. I didn't know if it was a nay or yay.
So the motion passes with one objection from Mayor Romero. We'll go to item 8, which is Jamie Brown will make the presentation. This is the PAG FY 2022-2026 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council, it's good to be with you. For this item, the Regional Council will be asked to amend the FY 22 through 2026 Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. If approved, TIP Amendment 2022.040 would program funding on 2 major ADOT projects. One is the I-10 Keno Traffic Interchange, or TI, and the other is the I-10 Country Club Traffic Interchange project. This TIP amendment was initiated by ADOT as the implementing agency. For both projects, the source of the funds are ADOT funds, known in the TIP as ASTP funds. These are to be spent on ADOT projects in the PAG planning area. Additionally, HERF 2.6% funds, which are limited to projects on the state system, would also be programmed on a Keno TI project. The details of the funding amounts by fiscal year and phase are included in your packet within the table. The TIP amendment was approved by the Transportation Planning Committee at the July 20th meeting and the Management Committee at the August 10th meeting. Many thanks to ADOT staff for working hard to advance these important regional projects. And Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, Mr. Rod Lane, the ADOT South Central District, would like to address the board on this item.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today regarding this. So the injection of funds into the PAG region by the federal IIJA legislation has offered the region the opportunity to advance these 2 important projects. ADOT's very excited at the opportunity to deliver them. These projects are the first to be delivered from the I-10 SR210 design concept report that was completed in 2020. This unique corridor study, a design concept report, defines the improvements along the I-10 corridor from the I-10 I-19 intersection to Kolb Road and from the intersection, and SR210 as it connects to I-10. With the value of $1.165 billion, for the entire corridor, this makes this entire corridor a major project as defined by the Federal Highway Administration. As a major project, there are additional administrative steps that the region must complete prior to the construction being authorized. These additional administrative steps may impact the fiscal year 23 construction authorization. ADOT and PAG staff will continue to navigate through the project delivery process, but future input from this board may be required. Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Any questions from the board? Jamie or Rod? Maxwell?
Just one thing I'd like to highlight, and this kind of makes this a unique situation. A lot of times these project, areas are done in a couple of years. So it kind of makes it easy. But this one, because of the magnitude of size and the number of intersections and the timeline really for lay down and conduct of these projects being over a long period of time, it's really important for the ADOT staff to stay engaged with us on this as we go through it. We need to get our support as they go forward. And a lot of these funds are available. These are all critical intersections. That segment of highways we know is one where it's connecting work centers together, and it can be very busy, and all the interchanges are incredibly important. But it's really the fact that the whole project's over $1 billion, and on top of it, it's going to take multiple years to complete all of them, and it's going to be more and more that would come to us with different individual projects as they get through, and potentially, as Mr. Lane stated, they may have to come back and every once in a while get an update from us and our proposal. So just want to say thank you for the presentation on that part.
Thank you.
Mayor Romero?
Mr. Chair, thank you so much. Thank you, Rod, for your presentation. You've heard from me for many years now. And I usually advocate for I-19 and I-10. And so I'm a huge supporter of these projects. Irvington is in there already, right? We're about to go into construction, I know. But very important for the continued economic development of our region is that we continue investing in I-10 headed east. We've had an opportunity to modernize our interchanges. Most of I-19 that are in Tucson, most of I-10 coming into Tucson from Phoenix, but equally important is I-10 headed east from South 6th Avenue all the way out into Pima County because of what it means to connect, right, I-19 into I-10 on the Sonoran corridor. So I'm really happy that this process is commencing. Country Club is going to be extremely important connection to the airport as well. And so, again, I can't say how supportive I am of the interchange improvements or modernization on Keno as well. Saying that, I just wanted to know a little bit more about the projects, like timelines. It seems very small amounts of money that you're requesting on the tip, or unless they're millions. But it seems like I-10 Country Club is $144,320.
Million.
Okay. I'm like, is this in millions or is this just hundreds? Okay. So can you talk to us about timeline and costs?
Well, I don't have the DCR in front of me,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor. I don't have the DCR in front of me, but I can speak as well. The total number of projects within a DCR is a total of 18. So hence the $1.2 billion cost. These are the first two that are being implemented. The way that the funding is shown in your packet, construction funding has to be obligated in fiscal year 23. One of the things that we have to do as part of this major project process, which is new to the region, and I believe this will be, I think, the first one in the state, is to develop a plan, an approach for this that has to be approved by the FHWA, and a financial plan and how the funding is all going to lay out, how the projects are going to be delivered, all of that process. We have to work with PAG to develop that entire process. That's our next step. So at the end of that process, before the construction is obligated, we will be able to share all of that with you, but we just haven't finished it. So the only thing we have to communicate at this point is really what's in the DCR. So we don't have an exact time frame yet until we project the funding. We look at how we can manage that funding to move forward with the entire corridor.
So what are you asking of PAG today, of the PAG board today? Are you asking for support? Are you asking for a particular number in terms of funds?
We are asking to move the funding up from the previous years up into the current year. We've just been in, the IIJA injected a significant amount of funding into ADOT's program. And ADOT's desire, with the approval of this board, is to put that funding on these two projects to move it forward. That's what we're requesting.
Perfect. That brings a lot of clarity. Thank you.
Other questions for Supervisor Scott?
Mr. Chair, just a question of protocol, and maybe I should direct it to Mr. Benavides. I've had an ongoing dialogue, both in the written and spoken word during the past week or so with the executive director about a recent meeting of the Transportation Planning Committee and TIP Subcommittee related to the development of the new TIP, but it doesn't have anything to do with this amendment. So I don't know if this is the appropriate time to make the comments I was going to make, or if it's better to do that during one of the items on the RTA board agenda, because the RTA board agenda does deal with RTA Next, and this conversation related to the TIP had a lot to do with RTA Next.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would say it'd be safer to do it under the RTA topics than this one. I will play it safe, not take a risk.
Thank you, Mr. Benavides. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Mr. Brown, are we inviting you back to the podium here?
Just thank you again, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. This is an action item that would have meant.
It is. Okay, so the action that is looking to get approved is an amendment to the Transportation Improvement Plan. And do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor, excuse me, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Well, thank you, Mr. Brown. We'll move on to item 9, legislative update on proposed transportation-related legislation. This is Mr. Zinda.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Regional Council. In case you have not heard yet, here first, the legislative session has ended. This is the second regular session of the 55th Arizona State Legislature, ending quite early on Saturday, June 25th at 12:25 a.m. I was going to say, since the session has ended, this would be my last update to you, at least until January, but it sounds like I will be back soon enough talking about Justice 40, perhaps. Onward with the update. I'll make this quick since you're probably already well aware and updated already. We know that the state legislature passed and the governor signed a budget at the tune of about $18 billion for fiscal year 2023, according to my accounting. This larger budget is a result of an over $4 billion surplus in revenues that the state had received through this last year. And of this budget, about $1 billion was appropriated for various transportation projects, including $400 million for the I-10 widening from Chandler to Casa Grande. The main bill where you can find all the transportation projects detailed and outlined with funding amounts is going to be House Bill 2858. This is a capital outlay bill, appropriations for 2022 to 2023. With that, here's just a quick summary of the bills that we were watching throughout this session and where they landed. So House Bill 2396 was an initial transportation appropriations bill influenced by the Rural Transportation Advisory Council. Had $50 million of projects throughout rural areas of greater Arizona. Several of those projects were actually included in that capital outlay bill that was signed into law, 2858. And this shows that there is maybe some willingness by the legislature to fund some of these more rural projects that are off some of the bigger state highway systems. House Bill 2598 or 2685, also Senate Bill 1356, all the same bill, was the transportation tax in Maricopa County, something that looks very much like our Regional Transportation Authority, but is absolutely distinct according to statute. This did receive bipartisan support in both chambers, but was ultimately vetoed, as you're aware, by the governor. Moving on to House Bill 2728. This is an appropriations for funding a Tier 2 study for the Sonoran corridor here in Pima County at about $14 million, and additionally $25 million for I-11 in Maricopa County, $14 million for the north-south corridor in Pinal County. This was ultimately included in that greater capital outlay bill for this fiscal year, and the funds have been provided. Senate Bill 1148 affected the vehicle license tax sales price. It would have changed the VLT to be calculated on the actual sales price of the car, as opposed to the MSRP, essentially rewarding you if you're able to bargain and get a good deal. This bill is essentially dead. The sponsoring legislator has since moved on, and it doesn't look like it will be resurrected, at least not yet. Senate Bill 1239, of course, was this appropriation of I-10, $400 million that I spoke of earlier. I don't think there's been any updates on the grant that they applied for, the mega grant. Total anticipated funding need for that is about $1 billion. This provided $400 million, and the project is expected to begin in the next fiscal year and be completed by 2026, of course, from Chandler to Casa Grande. House Bill 2701 related to the transaction privilege tax. Regarding prime contracting, and the Regional Council did take action on this and oppose this bill, I think back in March, and it is also dead. And so that just would have decreased the tax base for prime contracting classification of the TPT from 60% down to eventually 50%. Certainly could have affected RTA revenues a little bit, but we need not worry about that one anymore. And lastly, Senate Bill 1004 is another TPT one that affected remote sellers, had a variety of provisions. Probably the relevant point to us, in as much as it concerned the RTA, was going to be to apply TPT to taxable sales instead of gross sales. Although I'm not an accountant, I think that would have an impact on the general fund, since taxable sales tend to be less than gross sales. So, and that one is also dead and gone. With that, are there any questions I can answer for you with this legislative activity?
Questions?
No questions, but a comment.
Okay.
For the
Mayor
legislative.
Romero?
This is the legislative for not just state, but also federal, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I just had a comment, as I usually do. I just wanted to make sure that I thanked personally my colleagues on the PAG board and Pima County for their letters of support for the city of Tucson in its application for a $25 million raise grant that we applied for as a city of Tucson for the bipartisan infrastructure law that we received. Want to especially thank, as you all noticed, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg was in town, and I wanted to especially thank Senator Mark Kelly for his incredible work and in his insistent lobbying for the Tucson region. Also, of course, the work of Representatives Grijalva O'Halloran and Kirkpatrick, which are our delegation in the federal government. And thank you all for your help with that letter of support from PAG. This is one of the many ways that the city of Tucson is working to do our part to meet the funding gap that we all know exists with some RTA projects, and also to bring in federal funds from the bipartisan infrastructure law. Along those lines, I'm also happy to share that the city of Tucson was also awarded $12.1 million to increase the number of electric buses for our SunTran fleet. And we also received $1 million brownfields grant from the EPA. And so all in all, it is really good for our region to be able to bring in the funds that we should be bringing to our region. But just wanted to thank Pima County, especially for their letter of support for our raise grant, and of course PAG for their support, because I think this type of unity means the world to our federal partners. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Congratulations on all those successes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
General Maxwell.
just to kind of add on that, congratulations to the city on getting those grants. You know, it's debate all day if the, you know, money should be getting spent, but the fact of the matter, if the federal government's going to spend money, let's let them spend it here. And so there's a lot that we can go out and do to help that. And from this last state transportation board, the ADOT now has all of the requirements for all the funding programs that were established under the bipartisan infrastructure law. We got the last one just about a month ago. So if there's any of those that the cities and towns are interested in, they can go there to get the details on how to go about applying for those. And the SMART fund money that was appropriated by the legislature to help the cities and towns in those grant applications should be coming available as well. But the important thing on it is it's also available to pay back money that you may have already expended on applications for these grant funds. On the other side of it, with the Inflation Reduction Act, ADOT has yet to receive any information on the additional programs or dollars from the federal government and what's going to be required to go out after those. But I think you saw in some of the early successes by the city is I'd encourage folks to start leaning out and looking at it, getting their folks that work in that field of working with the federal government. And things you can bring to us, David, is what are these programs that are going to be directly infrastructure related that we may be able to either as an organization or individually have on in the future. So that's kind of an update from the State Transportation Board on what we know, more importantly now what we don't know. So
well, thank you. Mr. Zenda, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Brown, we're going to invite you back up. Bring us home here with the Amtrak update.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. We appreciate the opportunity to provide a brief update to the June 2nd Regional Council meeting regarding passenger rail service between Tucson and the Phoenix metro area. As you recall, at the June meeting, the Regional Council unanimously carried that the PAG Regional Council support the proposed impact initiative. As a result, today's meeting packet includes an expression of interest letter that PAG submitted to the Federal Railroad Administration docket, along with letters of support from the town of Marana, town of Oro Valley, and the Pima County Board of Supervisors resolution. In terms of next steps, the FRA will publish a notice requesting formal proposals to participate in the Corridor ID and Development Program. We anticipate this in the fourth quarter of this year. And at that point, eligible entities will need to provide some additional details regarding the new or enhanced corridor. FRA will review those proposals, and by May of 2023, we'll issue a project pipeline that identifies the corridors selected for development. We want to thank the Regional Council for unanimously supporting the June motion and for your continued support of this important intercity passenger rail corridor. And as we have more information about the expression of interest letter status, we will report back. Thank you very much.
Mayor Romero? No, go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the PAG staff for drafting the expression of interest, and Supervisor Scott for adding this item to the meeting agenda, as well as moving forward with a resolution over at the Pima County Board of Supervisors. This is super important. I just wanted to clarify, the expression of interest already has been submitted to the FRA, correct?
Correct.
Okay. It would have been, and I don't know if this was, I don't know what the intention of not including all of the jurisdictions on that makeup PAG with expression of interest. There was only a Sahuarita letter, an Oro Valley, and a Marana letter. But it would have been nice to have all jurisdiction letters submitted. So was there a particular reason why there was only two?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, Jackie helped us coordinate and send out an email asking everyone to submit by, I believe it was August 18th, and we only received those 3 replies, and be happy to amend and add if there's anybody else that wants to.
Yeah, if there is a
submit letters.
possibility of amending,
I'm sure we can.
I would
amend it.
ask the PAG board to, because I don't know if that email was sent to just myself, which if it was just myself, I get more than 100 emails a day, and I don't have the opportunity to filter all of those emails. So if my chief of staff or someone else in the city was not included in that email, then I would ask that we amend and include a letter of interest
I believe
from
we can
all
do
of the jurisdictions that sit at PAG, especially because the city of Tucson has been super attentive and interested in this particular issue. And there was also a letter generated by a bipartisan letter, as a matter of fact, generated from jurisdictions in both Tucson and Phoenix that was signed by mayors, actually all the mayors sitting around this table that should be included in the expression of interest.
If I get, Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, be happy to, if anybody wants to go ahead and send your letters to Jackie, be happy to amend it and add it to the letter.
Alrighty, thank you.
Mayor Honey?
I just wanted to comment. So on the Amtrak, all of us, all entities have been meeting with Amtrak off and on. And for those of you that are going to the League of Cities next week, I'm going to be meeting with Amtrak at 1 o'clock on Wednesday. And like we would invite any other mayors or supervisors that are there if they'd like to come in. And I don't know what we can do to reinvent the wheel. I think we've all shown interest in Amtrak. It ends up being a lot bigger than us. You know, there's a lot of money. Does it need an extra track, or can you get extra trains on the tracks? Where are the stops going to be and who's going to pay for it? And I'm very interested in having a stop in Marana, and I think the original did have a stop in Marana. The thing is, after 4 years, I believe, then it's up to the municipality to support the O&M of the rail station, you know, so a lot of us have to look at that. It could be a loss later. You might not make money on the stop, but it may generate money in your community for people staying in your hotels or coming to events. But Amtrak seems to be working pretty hard toward some kind of an end. And, you know, so like I said, I'd like to invite anybody that wishes to Wednesday at 1 o'clock. I don't know what room. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mayor Honey. Supervisor Scott?
I did have both written and verbal communication with the chairs of the Maricopa and Pinal County Boards of Supervisors. I shared with them the resolution that the Pima County Board passed and encouraged them to take up similar resolutions. I don't know if they have, but given that that meeting is next week, Mayor Honey, if you and your colleagues know any of the mayors in both Maricopa and Pinal, if they could follow up with if they're inclined to follow up with their supervisors, that would be very much appreciated.
Okay, any other comments? Mayor Romero?
I agree, Supervisor Scott and Mayor Honey. This is bigger than PAG. This is bigger than Tucson. This is an Arizona investment that could be very exciting. And I agree with you that it could really bolster the economic development opportunities throughout Arizona. And so I love the idea of contacting other mayors, but as well as other board of supervisors, because the more support for this investment, it's a $6 billion investment in connecting Tucson and Phoenix and all of the jurisdictions in between. It's really important. And I think that it could even be bigger than PAG-MAG, right? It could possibly be the state of Arizona that would have to step in and look at what happens after the initial investment in the first 5 years of MNO. So I would suggest we even have in our quarterly meetings, we have an update about this if possible, just so we can stay on track and know what's happening and share information about meetings and information about what's happening in other jurisdictions.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, do you have some sense of the regional state support for this proposal?
I think the letters that I've seen are from our region, but that bipartisan letter that Mayor Romero referenced from last year is a great indication of the support statewide.
Thank you, Chairman.
Just want to say, maybe about a year and a half ago, 2 years, somebody from Amtrak contacted us as a tribe. And the reason they did that is because they hadn't done that. And we also asked for spots in Marana, Casa Grande, instead of just one beeline that goes straight to, the part of Phoenix or Tempe where it was going to go. But then at that meeting, when we met that young man, we told him, you need to go to PAG. You need to also, because he did say he was going to come to different jurisdictions and talk with town, cities and stuff like that. But I sent him here. And then after that, we hosted him before he came here. I think we hosted him at the tribe. And I don't know if he met with other tribes, but he met with us trying to figure out, were we interested? Do we have any recommendations? If we send a support letter, I think we send it on behalf of just the tribe. But we'd be happy to send one as a member of PAG, because at that time, I think that's what it was looking for, just how does your tribe feel like? So I think we've done that. It's just that sitting here in this council here, regional council, I think it's stronger if we all just now, like I agree with the mayor said, we all just send, a letter of interest of how we're all happy to see how that will work out. Because I think, in a sense, when you start looking at our tribal members and where they're at, we also said, but once the track ends right there, then some of them don't have the income to get an Uber, like some of us have the luxury of doing. So you would have to look at shuttles on how to take them to different parts of each town. So that's what we explained to that young man. But he said he would come back, and I guess he would come back over here with you to be with you and introduce. So we'll see where he's at. And I hope we get some of that, some of those $1 billion to make sure we build the you know, how the cities can attach to each other and grow like that. Because you see that a lot on the east part of the United States, you know, and that really helps with the own zones and all that stuff. Especially, I'm so happy and proud of the electric buses, you know, that are coming and will be part of the city of Tucson. I remember riding the bus in the late 60s with my dad, when it was a yellow bus with a green bottom like that, and you would hold onto the rail. There was no buckles or seat belts or nothing like that. You just held on for dear life, but you got there. And we used to come from our village over here on Grant. It seemed far away then, you know, as a kid, but anymore, I mean, it's just a few minutes on your modern cars and all that stuff, but not everybody has that luxury. So we still have to watch out for that. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you.
You know, wholeheartedly, we will do a letter if that's what it takes.
McGee, is there a deadline that you would like these letters to be submitted?
It's up to you. So initially, we believed that there was going to be a deadline for registering online. But I believe, Dave and Jamie, correct me, I believe there's no deadline yet, correct?
We both reviewed the Federal Register notice from May on this, and we could not find a deadline. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we couldn't find a deadline. So I would say it would be nice if we can get it within the next week, so we can go back and amend our submittal.
Is that possible for everyone? Okay. Excellent.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Mr. McGee, I'd like to thank you and your staff for preparing the packet for this meeting. It represents a significant amount of work, so thank you very much. And for the presentations, also to the council, thank you for reviewing the material and your staff. It's much appreciated. Of course, it adds to the richness of the conversation, so thank you. With that, I believe we will adjourn, and Chairman Yucapizio will turn it over to you.
Thank you,
So
sir.
we vote on adjournment first,
Or do we vote on adjournment?
or we just adjourn?
We vote at the town level, but it didn't say vote on it, so I'm just following directions.
So I won't speak for Thomas for that, but I believe the chair can, at the consent of the committee, the chair can. adjourn.
Anybody not agree that we?
There you go. There you go.
Not agreeing, Chair. Thank you, sir. I'm going. We'll call the RTA meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Here.
Joe Winfield,
Here.
Supervisor Rex Scott,
Here.
Chairman Peter Yucapizio,
Here.
Mayor Regina Romero,
Here.
and Mayor Batas.
Here. Thank you. We'll move on to item 2. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the board, speakers are limited to a 3-minute oral presentation and may submit written comments of any length for the board's files. Call to the audience is limited to a total of 30 minutes. Individual board members may respond to criticism made by those individuals who have addressed the board. However, the board will not discuss or take action on a matter raised during a call to the audience that is not already on the agenda. At this time, we do have a speaker in the queue. Thank you, caller. You are now live with the RTA board. Please start your comment by stating your name for the record. After that, you will have 3 minutes to address the RTA board. At the 2-minute mark, I will politely cut in and request that you wrap up your comments. You may now proceed with your comment. Speaker? Caller?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, sorry. My name is Miranda Schubert, and I'm co-chair of the City of Tucson Complete Streets Coordinating Council. We appreciate the opportunity to provide comment on the improvement project along First Avenue, spanning 3 miles between Grant and River Roads. The 20 members on the council review projects for accessibility, inclusivity, sustainability, and a number of other priorities that are key to the quality of life and economic health of our community, as outlined in the City of Tucson's 2019 Complete Streets Policy. We believe through a safe, connected, and equitable transportation network, we can foster a vibrant, healthy, equitable, interconnected, accessible, environmentally sustainable, and more livable city where everyone can move about safely, comfortably, and with dignity. But it is no accident that the first of our guiding principles ensures that we consider projects that provide a safe travel experience to all. In short, we're committed to saving lives. When evaluated through that prism, we cannot wait any longer to make improvements to this very dangerous corridor, which has significant pedestrian and cycling activity, in part because of its function as a high-demand transit route. In just a 4-year period between 2013 and 2017, there were almost 800 crashes along that stretch, half of which resulted in an injury. 8 people died. More recently, from 2016 to 2020, there were 779 crashes with 12 fatalities. In fact, this corridor has been identified in the top 10% of roadways where pedestrian crashes are occurring in the city. It is the coordinating council's position that we do not agree with the project review task force recommendation to move this project to RTA next. Sending it to RTA next places the project at risk that is already long overdue. We strongly encourage reconsideration of this course of action. From a functionality perspective, projections indicate that the 4-lane modernization project performs as well or better than the original 2006 6-lane widening project. The 4-lane option would also require less taking of private property and would be better for pedestrians because of fewer lanes to cross on a high crash pedestrian corridor. A significant effort to solicit public opinion has already taken place. Over the course of a 4-month period, more than 1,200 surveys were collected from bus riders, library patrons, and door-to-door efforts. It would be a senseless delay to duplicate that effort. This project is the essence of good government. It protects our community. It's grounded in data. It was developed thoughtfully and with buy-in from those who live and work in the corridor. It's fiscally prudent. And despite that, it's at risk. The answer cannot be to dismiss current realities and proceed with a plan that was appropriate for 2006, no matter the cost. We have a foundational obligation and a humanitarian one to proceed with this project. Please reconsider. This corridor can't be fixed soon enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, at this time, it does not appear that there are any more callers in the queue.
Move on to item number 3.
Minutes.
Oh, the minutes, yeah.
So moved.
Mr. Chair? Maybe you need a second, but.
Second.
Okay, motion second.
Then
I mentioned at the June meeting that we needed a shared understanding of how we will account for inflation for projects that are outstanding. And I don't see that statement in the meeting minutes. And I don't mean to be picky, but that's a pretty important piece of the conversation that we had. So if I'd like to ask the motion maker to consider an amendment to include in the meeting minutes the statement that I had made that we include a shared understanding of how we will account for inflation in outstanding RTA projects.
I'm in agreement.
Second. On favor?
Aye.
Ayes. Ayes have it. So, thank you. Move on to item number 4.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the RTA Board. We're bringing before you a recommendation for approval of resolutions 2022-007 through 2022-010, together with their associated IGAs and IGA amendments. This is in response, or this is based upon a request for proposals or a reissue of one that we did in March of this year for categorical funding transfers to eligible RTA with 41 projects. Basically, this allows for the closing of accounts on completed or inactive regional transportation authority categorical projects. Under this proposal, any remaining funds from those completed or inactive categorical projects may be transferred upon RTA board approval to RTA 41 eligible projects. What we've got is 2 projects of the city of Tucson, the East Side Park and Ride and the city of Tucson Bus Storage and Maintenance Facility that have funds, operation funds that have not been drawn upon for a number of years. And the city of Tucson has requested that these be reallocated to the Marianne Cleveland Shared Use Path and the 18th Street, 8th Avenue and South Campbell Canal Bike Boulevards. The total value of these projects is $492,000 and staff recommends approval.
Questions or comments? Or none, is there a motion to approve these?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Days. Ayes have it. Move on to item number 5. Laughlin.
Mr. Chair, members of the RTA board. I'm Preston McLaughlin. I am the senior transit planner with the RTA. And today I wanted to discuss the RTA's Title VI plan for 2022, which is required to receive federal funds that are primarily used for Sun Shuttle's rural transit services. After this discussion, I would like to request approval of this plan. There may be some overlap from Mr. Barrett's presentation. As Mr. Barrett mentioned, the Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and 1994 Executive Order of Environmental Justice require that any federally funded planning, programming, and project implementation activities be free of discrimination on the basis of race, national origin, age, gender, disability, or income. The RTA currently receives federal funding from the Federal Transit Administration through Section 5311 and 5307 grant programs for the Sun Shuttle Transit System's capital and operating expenses. Therefore, the RTA must comply with these federal requirements. ADOT does require that the RTA's Title VI plan, as well as the non-discrimination policy and limited English proficiency plan, be reviewed and approved by the RTA board every 2 years. As a state subrecipient of the federal funds, staff has used an FTA compliant plan template that was actually provided directly by ADOT Civil Rights Office. And so this Title VI plan outlines the manner in which the RTA's federally funded transit activities comply with the requirements of both Title VI and the Executive Order on Environmental Justice, as well as how the RTA can respond or responds to complaints or allegations of discrimination. The plan contains the procedures for filling a Title VI complaint, as well as a copy of the Title VI complaint form, which is available in both English and Spanish. And then please note that as part of the process of development, the 2022 RTA Title VI implementation plan being discussed has already been reviewed and approved by ADOT Civil Rights Office on May 25th, 2022. And ADOT's review and approval ensures that this plan is compliant with all federal requirements. And so I would like to request the approval of this plan from the RTA board, so the RTA is in complete compliance with ADOT and the FTA. Thank you. Questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Tried to move that.
Sorry, getting in the way. I think this document is focused again on the FTA requirements, and it checks the boxes that we need to check. The difference, I think, is between the PAG Title VI report or implementation plan and this one is that the PAG one is we're an MPO, a plan and organization. And I feel as though the responsibility of having much more of a vision and strategy in terms of Title VI requirements on the PAG side should be much more thorough, as I previously discussed. So I will be voting yes on this one because the RTA is an implementation much more than a planning organization. And I know that there's conversations happening in terms of guiding principles and so many other things that we do at RTA that there's no opportunity to do at PAG. So I just wanted to add that comment because I will be voting yes on this one versus, even though it lacks detail, but I think the PAG Title VI implementation plan should be much more thorough than it is. Wanted to add that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Not a motion's been made, seconded, and also all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the RTA board.
Item 6, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the RTA board. We're seeking today approval of the purchase of up to 7 vehicles for the Sun Shuttle fixed route service. The RTA Sun Shuttle service currently operates 24 vehicles on its fixed route services. The RTA has completed a transit asset master plan for the Sun Shuttle fleet, and we adapted standards for the span of time that vehicles will remain in service. Service life can be based on years, mileage, or a combination of both. For the RTA, our standards for vehicle replacement is based on years of service. Vehicles in the Sun Shuttle fleet have a 7-year service life, and we target replacement of these vehicles at 5 to 7 years, depending on the class of vehicles. The smaller vehicles tend to wear out a little bit more rapidly than the larger vehicles do. Up to 7 vehicles in the Sun Shuttle fleet will have reached their targeted service life at the replacement year. These vehicles are scheduled for replacement. These vehicles scheduled for replacement will be funded in part by Section 5307 funds. The RTA staff requests approval of the purchase of these 7 vehicles for an estimated amount of $1,137,777. FDA 5307 grant funding is anticipated to pay for 686,000 of that. Remaining funds will need to come from RTA Project 48, which is our neighborhood circulated bus system program. There has been approximately a 25 to 40% increase in the cost per vehicle when we've compared them to our recent pricing, or the pricing upon which the grant was requested. It's well known in the automotive industry. It's been turbulent with rising prices and supply chain issues, and the bus manufacturing industry has been no different. The RTA last received approval for purchase of vehicles in October last year. We ordered 6 E450 based vehicles for an estimated cost of $740,000. These vehicles have yet to have chassis assigned to them to the coach builder. So these are, we are continuing to experience delays, and will likely on this procurement as well. These vehicles are being purchased through an existing ADOA procurement, which lists the RTA as an eligible purchaser. Staff requests approval of this authorization to go up to the 7 vehicles. We will review the fleet as we get closer to that purchase date to make sure that if we have the opportunity to extend the life on some of these vehicles, we will choose to do so.
Do you have any questions or comments? Or none?
Move to approve.
Second.
Favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays, ayes have it. Thank you, Mr. Drew.
Okay.
For next.
Okay, thank you. On this item, we are requesting authorization of the executive director to negotiate a contract including enhanced service expectations with National Express, the current incumbent provider for Sun Shuttle, for a 3-year contract with up to 2 one-year time extensions. In the event a contract acceptable to both parties cannot be reached by September 30th, 2022, the RTA executive director is authorized to discontinue negotiations with National Express and begin negotiations with the second most highly ranked bidder, RATP Dev. The RTA directly contracts for Sun Shuttle fixed route and Sun Shuttle ADA dollar rights paratransit services in the delivery of special needs transit for elderly and disabled citizens, which is RTA 47, neighborhood bus circulator service, which is RTA 48, and we do some express service, which is RTA 49 with this contract. The current contract with total Total Transit Enterprises expired in June. And a new solicitation has been conducted. We have had some extensions approved by this board. On December 1st, the RTA released an RFP seeking qualified contractors, and we received 4 offerers. The RTA had an evaluation committee comprised of transit professionals from the town of Bull Valley, city of Tucson, and Pima County, as well as our staff, review the proposals and discuss the merits of the bids. And this was presented to the RTA board at the June 2nd meeting. At that meeting, following extensive discussion regarding service performance expectations, the RTA board directed staff to reprice the RTA's fixed route and paratransit services separately for reconsideration of award or recommendation. A second best and final offer was requested of the respondents with direction to bid each item or each service separately, assuming that they may be awarded only one of the 2 services. They were also directed to confirm that they would honor their original offer if awarded both services. If the RTA board chooses to award contracts separately using the RFP scoring criteria, the highest scoring proposal for fixed route services is RATP Dev, and the highest scoring proposal for paratransit services remains from National Express. The overall cost of services when provided by separate contractors will increase significantly due to the duplication of management, maintenance, customer service, and facility expenses. Since the last meeting, National Express has brought in additional resources to improve service performance and has placed managerial oversight of its Tucson operation directly under its Western Regional Office. We have received an improvement plan, which was developed, and the National Express staff has been transitioning from an independent contractor relationship with its drivers to employee drivers. National Express has committed additional signing bonuses to hire drivers, and service performance appears to be improving. However, reporting requirements and current contracts such as invoicing, KPI reports, maintenance activities, and complaint tracking and follow-up continue to be delayed, and the service improvement is largely measured by us by the number of reduced complaints we've received. RTA has engaged an independent firm specializing in transit regulatory compliance, Robbie L. Sarles and Associates, to review the National Express Sun Shuttle services for past and current compliance with the FTA rules and RTA contract terms for drug and alcohol testing, safety and training, and vehicle maintenance. We do expect that report to be available to us so that we can incorporate its findings in our negotiations. The evaluation committee met again to review the second best and final offer and voted to recommend award of a single contract, finding that the duplications of costs and overhead was not warranted. They further reiterated the recommendation that the contract be terminated and awarded to the second highest rated contractor in the event improved performance in service or reporting are not achieved, or in the event of other contract compliance problems. I'm joined today by Ms. Amber Wagner, the RTA Transit Service Administrator, and Mr. Rob Samuelson, our Procurement Officer, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. DeGrood, just to ask you to reiterate something that was discussed last time the board had this item before them. Assuming that either National Express or the second highest ranked bidder is awarded the contract, there are metrics that they have to meet each and every month, correct?
There are metrics within our contract, and there are penalties. Those penalties at this point are monetary, and we do assess them.
And those metrics have to be met not just overall, but each month, correct?
Month, and in fact, we deduct from their payments or their invoices the penalty on a monthly basis.
And wasn't it also discussed when this item was before the board previously that if there were successive months of failing to meet those metrics, that the contract could be removed from that person.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Scott, that was part of the conversation that took place, and that would be something that we would incorporate into our contract discussions. That does not exist in the current contract that we have now.
So that would be part of the negotiations?
Yes, sir, if I may, Mr. Chair, Supervisor Scott. So as you recall, we had that as an option to be able to include that during the negotiations. So the motion today that we're requesting for you to pass is to allow us to start the negotiation process and bring that to the table. And I'm optimistic that they will accept it. And if they don't, then we move on to the second bidder.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, I would move to approve the action as described in the agenda, as long as it's clear that that month-to-month compliance is one of the items being negotiated.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We have more comments.
I'll second it, but I'd like to speak on it as well. This service has been absolutely unacceptable. I mean, there's not even any question about it. If you're an elderly person, somebody that is medically or physically unable to get to somewhere, and on some of these different routes and stuff, it was 60% or something. Just not acceptable, period. And I question if it wasn't meeting the criteria before and we're going with the same company. I have some issues there. And, you know, we may have to pony up some more money. But if you're going to provide a service, especially the part, not just the dial-a-ride, but the Sun Shuttle for elderly or disabled or individuals that have a really important place to go. And if they're even 70%, I don't consider it, you know, or even 80, I don't consider acceptable. I mean, occasionally you're going to miss one for a flat tire or whatever, but I will support the motion. But I'm going to watch this because this is something I'm passionate about. And if they screw up, then we got to do something else. And I'm very passionate about that.
Mr. Chair, thank you for that, Mr. Mayor Honey. We're equally concerned, and we've been working, as Mr. DeGroot said, working with the vendor to make sure that they are improving. They have made some improvement. The main improvement was that they're going from contract drivers to employee drivers, and that's been helping a little bit. We're going to continue, as Supervisor Scott included in his motion, we're going to continue to monitor that on a monthly basis. And if they don't perform, I'll come back to you and recommend that we move on with a different vendor.
Thank you.
Any other comments or?
No question, Mr. Chair. Are you attaching a timeline or a time to bring this back to review if the service is not, the service delivery is not to the standards that?
I didn't,
Right,
but
okay.
I'm willing to consider that, Mayor Romero.
I'm just asking Supervisor Scott, because I know that this concern, as Mayor Honey said, is huge, it's big. It doesn't affect the city of Tucson as much as the outside jurisdictions outside of the city of Tucson. So I just wanna know how much time are we giving ourselves for this particular company to improve? Is it 6 months? Is it 8 months? What is an acceptable timeline for us to, especially if the highest scoring proposal for the fixed route was another company? So maybe that's something that Mr. Mogini could guide us with.
Of course, Mr. Chair, Mayor Romero, last time we talked about a 6-month period would be reasonable. As we start the negotiations, obviously we'll start with the 6-month period again. And personally, I believe that if they can't turn it around in 6 months, then it's time to come back and have this conversation.
Alrighty, that's great. That's gives it a little bit more clarity in terms of the amount of time we're willing to, yeah.
To the motion that was made, and you're going to amend it.
I would like to amend it, if it's okay with my seconder, to make sure that 6-month period is conveyed, as well as the month-to-month expectation of compliance. Thank you, Member Romero.
Thank you.
Thank you, motion and second.
I would agree with that, and I would even ask that we get maybe monthly updates, not meetings or anything, as to what the measurement requirements are for them meeting our criteria.
Sure, Mr. Chair. I mean, I would be happy to do that, or we can send out a memo on a monthly basis to hopefully demonstrate that they are moving in the right direction. As Mr. Giroud mentioned, since June, we've seen some improvements. The number of complaints have been reduced. So they're trending in the right direction at this point.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, Mr. Groot, could you, in the report, your report, you stated that operating them separately, and I think we all recognize that the National Express one, the dollar one, and that even that take, you said it was a significant amount if we're going to operate them as two separate contracts. Can you give us a little more specifics on what significant amount is?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, Mr. Maxwell, yeah, we're looking at, if we were to award, say, to the second highest bidder on the, for the entirety of the project, we'd be looking at about a $9.5 million premium over a 3-year period. That would go up to a little over $11 million if we were to award separately.
There are no further questions or comments, and we do have a motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it. Thank you. Move on to the next one. Cool.
Mr. Chair, for this item, Paki is going to join us on the Zoom, and obviously Mr. McGovern, who's the chair of the CAC, is with us as well if you have any questions after Paki's presentation. So go ahead, Paki.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Today, what I want to do is give a slide presentation on the RTA Next Plan, CAC activities, and then hear from you on any discussion direction that you have. So as I think you were aware from the last presentation I gave, we are currently in phase 3 of the RTA Next Plan development process. And this is where the CAC and the TMC are beginning to review and narrow submitted projects, align projects to meet goals, and also balance funding needs per element based on your established budget when we get to that point. As you are aware, the CAC's purpose is to provide input on the development of the next RTA plan for your consideration and then eventual voter approval. The draft plan must align with statutes and board policies within the RTA. The CAC has adopted a framework to guide development of the plan using elements such as corridor, transit, safety, environment, and economic vitality. Projects have been submitted via the Technical Management Committee members at the request of you and the CAC. So in terms of your responsibilities in this process, you'll be providing a budget for the draft plan, determining and providing the CAC with a budget based on the RTA tax rate, as well as any projected revenue source estimates. This will be used to program the funding in the draft RTA plan, including establishing a percentage range of funding for each element. You will also be providing us direction on possible use of RTA dollars for maintenance in the next RTA plan. You'll direct funding set-aside amounts for current plan overlap needs and provide additional direction on all policy matters. In terms of the CAC role in this process, the CAC as an advisory body and not a policy authority, the CAC will be reviewing named project lists to identify project priorities. And these are the ones that meet the regional goals. They'll be narrowing down project lists to match the budget that you'll be setting. They will be seeking technical support and working iteratively with the TMC. They'll also be providing input for the development of the draft plan that Pima County voters are likely to support. The CAC will recommend the initial draft plan to you by July 1st of 2023 as you directed, And they will also be refining the plan as directed by you based on any public feedback. The TMC's role in this process as an advisory body, the members from each of the jurisdictions have submitted project lists for CAC consideration. They are providing technical support and jurisdiction insight to the CAC during the draft plan development process. And by technical support, this includes things as, looking at scope, costs, input on goals and outcomes, and those sorts of things. This TMC will also be recommending the initial draft plan to the RTA board by July 1st, 2023, as you directed, in tandem with the CAC. And then they'll also be refining the plan as directed by you. The CAC is delegated by you to develop the draft plan, and then the TMC supports the CAC with this technical feedback and plan development. The point is to have one consensus-based plan to submit to you. This is just an illustration of the iterative process. And again, I'm presenting this to let you know how we've been working, that we've been following this process. This shows kind of a process that we use for the guiding principles, but it will continue to be the same during the draft plan and during the project refinement process. Basically, it's getting board direction from you. CAC does some red lines, TMC reviews, goes back to CAC for revisions, TMC provides feedback, CAC provides the final draft, and then it goes to you for your review and final direction as you have received prior to this meeting. This is just a reminder that we've been encouraging, all of our committees. The open meeting law reminder, the process is iterative and appears cumbersome to some volunteer committee members. However, we're trying to, remind PAG and RTA, we're trying to remind committee staff that we as staff members and committee chairpersons are legally responsible and accountable for ensuring that all the committee activities be conducted under this open meeting law. This is in strict compliance with the ARS open meeting law statute. Just as a reminder of something that we've been trying to encourage as we move through this process. In terms of milestones, these are milestones we've been providing to the TMC and the CAC, and these align with your June 2nd direction. By October 27th of this year, you'll be reviewing and confirming revenue updates, establishing a fiscally constrained budget, and providing direction on current RTA plan carryover projects. Also, during that time frame, you'll be approving the budget for the RTA Next and assigning percentages for main plan elements. By November of this year, CAC will be identifying a list of named corridor projects with technical support from the TMC. And again, that includes refining scope, cost estimates, those sorts of things. By the end of the year in December, we're hoping that the board will approve a list of projects to analyze further for inclusion in the draft plan, and that you'll provide a final direction on the plan elements and the sub-elements that will be considered in the draft plan that's being prepared by the CAC. Additional milestones by spring of next year, hopefully in March, the RTA will develop final cost estimates for all the named projects. And then by May of next year, you'll be able to finalize all the policy considerations needed to complete the initial draft plan. This includes setting the plan implementation periods, confirming financing sources, and those kinds of details. The CAC in May will fine-tune the draft plan, any elements, sub-elements, carryover projects, new projects to match the budget that you provided, those sorts of things to fine-tune. And then again, by July 1 of 2023, the CAC and the TMC will have a draft plan review and CAC recommendations of the initial draft plan for you. And then finally, by the second part of next year, beginning in August, you'll be able to review and approve a draft plan for public review. And then per your direction, we were looking at the period of August through October to have that public review of the draft plan and the feedback. Then from October to December of next year, final plan revisions based on public feedback will be made. An election date will be established, and the RTA board approval for voter consideration will be completed. So in terms of the regional framework, this is the guiding principles and goals. The CAC has met 3 times to discuss this framework. They provided red lines several times, and the red lines from the August 1st meeting were sent to the TMC for review and feedback. The TMC met on August 10th to discuss and provide feedback on all of the guidelines and the goals. And then the CAC met to discuss and adopt the revisions on August 15th, which was their last meeting. The CAC submitted the adopted revisions to you that are in your packet. They submitted them. This was submitted last week on August 18th. And we are looking for you to review and provide direction, particularly on any policy related issues. And with that, that's my update. And you have in your packet the guiding principles and goals. And I can answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
I know that the co-chairs of the CAC are present, Mr. Tom McGovern, and I think the vice chair. I'm not too sure if both of them are online. I would love to hear from them. This is an item that of discussion from the Citizens Advisory Committee. I would like to hear from Mr. McGovern and Ms. Carolyn Campbell, what they're thinking, what their discussions look like, what their concerns are, and their recommendation in front of us, and if they feel we should move forward with their revisions adopted to our framework for RTA plan development. I think it's August 15th of 2022 that they were approved.
There we agree. That means yes. Let's hear from him.
Very good, Mr. Chairman and Madam Mayor. I wanted to let you know that I'm extremely happy with the way that the Citizen Advisory Committee has come together to work on its guiding principles. There were some, in my view, some significant improvements in our framework that were proposed and hashed out amid a fair amount of debate and disagreement, but always extremely politely and properly. So I couldn't be happier with the way the committee has put this together. Also, I think the results you'll see are somewhat more robust, let's say, than those of our original framework. And as such, I think are a great improvement. Some of our next most important work, obviously, in the development of our projects will include a couple of new working groups that we've put together to really help speed up and also intensify to some extent the amount of input that we can generate and get into our deliberations. Additionally, the Technical Management Committee has established a date next month for a formal all-day workshop to start prioritizing the projects that the TMC has submitted to the CAC. Carolyn, Mary Veras, our other vice chair, and myself plan to participate in that. We were invited by the TMC and are happy to accept that invitation to provide whatever input we can, particularly as the TMC has stated that they are very interested in using our framework as they do their prioritization work. So all in all, I think we have positive news certainly to report, and look forward to hearing from the board about some of the deliberations that you'll have over the next few months, I guess, about the various budgets, categorical elements, whether you want to pursue maintenance as an aspect of the plan, and how you think the best way to handle our final recommendation, which has to do with flexibility of the plan. We think that the resiliency of the plan is important so that 10 years, 15 years down the road, as conditions change, as more and more technology improvements occur, and as our population estimates become more clear, we will have an opportunity then to make changes in a thoughtful way that also speaks to the importance of the voters' opinions and the voters' confidence in our whole process. Perhaps Carolyn would like to add anything.
Not really. I think Chairman McGovern said it all pretty well. The only thing I would add about our framework, our guiding principles and goals, is that we did ask the Technical Management Committee to look at them, and they actually gave us some suggestions after we went through a long process, as Tom said. And I think this really, I agree, it really improved our guiding principles, but we got even some more feedback, great thoughtful feedback from the TMC, and we incorporated that into our final version. So this includes their feedback as well.
Yeah, I might add just one quick thing. I listened with interest to the conversations that the Regional Council and the board have had regarding Title VI compliance reports from PAG RTA. And I think the improvements, if you will, and the guiding principles here for the CAC include quite a bit of focus on Title VI points of interest, and more than curious as to how the board sees those, things that I characterize as improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I want to thank again the co-chairs of the CAC. It's been a process that you've been working through, and I do think it's been a big part of the team building. And as you said, you both said you believe you've got a better product now. What I'd like to clarify before we begin the discussion, because I'm sure there's going to be some discussion, is what is our responsibility as a board with this? Because as I understand it, this is their framework, CAC's framework, their guidelines. This is really more for informational purposes for us, and we can comment, give our opinions on it, but we are not required to approve this. Is that true, Executive Director?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Maxwell, that is correct. If you recall, we had this conversation back in June as well. And as part of the motion that was made back in June, the request was to have CAC work with TMC. TMC provided feedback, and then for CAC to submit it to the RTA board for the same reason, for additional feedback and direction from the RTA board. And I might add, Town of Sahuarita provided feedback in writing, which is on your table side. Town of Marana provided feedback. That's on your table side. So we'll get that to the CAC as well, or any additional feedback from any board members. We can send those individually or collectively. That's up to you. But the intent is to provide more feedback and direction, and making sure that there is alignment in the direction that we're all going as CAC, TMC, and the board. So that alignment will come back to you and check on every meeting from here on.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
CAC. I spend more time on the CAC than every other RTA project combined 5 times over. I've been a little disappointed, and Chairman McGovern is a friend, and I have talked to him several times. It seems to me like the CAC is concentrating more on social engineering than the quality, necessity, and the preference for how they are done on the projects. CAC does not make policy. This board makes policy. And we make policy and submit it to the CAC, and they should work within the policy of the RTA board. I quit listening to the CAC meetings, but I have 4 or 5 people, including a couple CAC members, that call me after every meeting and said they spend more time talking about climate change, equity, trying to get cars off the road and things of that nature than they do about projects. And that is not the CAC's job. The CAC's job is to take projects submitted by the 9 entities on this board and prioritize them as to when they could be done, how they could be financed, and what can happen. And it seems to me like CAC is trying to make some policy decisions, which is not their job. And I have not been pleased. I'm a big RTA supporter. I think it's the best thing that's happened in Pima County in the last 30 or 40 years in what we've been able to do to help all of us. But it is not the CAC is not a political machine. It's not a policy machine. The CAC's primary job is to take projects we submit and put them in order. And a lot of these other things, I think, are a waste of time and a waste of effort. And my blood pressure is getting higher and higher all the time. I may have to come into Tucson and get some medication or something. But anyway, I'm a supporter of the CAC group. I have not been happy with the last 3 or 4 meetings, and I've spent literally hundreds of hours talking to many of you and many people in the community and board members. And I just don't want you to get off topic as to what you're charged. I thought Paki's presentation was excellent, and she always does an excellent presentation about what the charge is for the CAC and trying to implement the timetable for us to move forward for RTA Next, which I hope we do, because I think it benefits us all. And, you know, the most important word in RTA is regional. And we need to think regionally. And that's just a comment I want to make. I think they've kind of been a little bit off task. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mary Honey, I would respectfully disagree to some extent with your characterization. Just a reminder, the board assigned another 50% new members to our committee, in essence, to renew the 35-member roster. And as a result of that work, of putting that committee back together, it was important that those guidelines be revisited. The idea being that the board assigned this committee on the basis of trying to reflect what the community desires and needs are in order that we could present something to the voters that would be acceptable and could be voted on positively. I think that before we've actually deliberated about a single project, we should at least recognize that the members who have asked for these new guiding principles that you see before you, that were accepted unanimously or near unanimously by the rest of the CAC, are representative of parts of the community at least. And so I would say that if we're going to try to get a plan, and we are going to present a plan that we believe can be approved at the ballot box, then we're going to need to address those issues that are of importance to those various parts of the community that will be voting. And, I do not expect that that will dominate what you end up seeing as a roster of projects, but I think it will be factored in at some level. We have to prioritize these projects. There's 108 of them, remember, and who knows how many of them will make it through, particularly if you assign more projects from RTA 1. So, my request, I guess, is to be patient and see what comes to you, but we will certainly be in touch all along the way, so you're not going to get surprised.
I want to express appreciation to Paki and Tom and Carolyn for all of the work that you are doing and will be doing in the future, and that this framework represents. You actually answered one of the questions that I had, and that was, how much support from the CAC was there for this framework that's been presented to us? And it sounds like it was nearly unanimous. Tom, you spoke of, as you were responding to Mayor Romero's inviting you to kind of speak to the process. You spoke about plan flexibility, you spoke about maintenance. I don't know that you spoke about inflation or cost escalations as time goes forward. Are those aren't necessarily represented in the framework, at least as I review it. So could you, how will those flexibility obviously is an interest, maintenance is an interest for some, and then the cost escalation, how will those be considered by the CAC? Or?
Well, Mr. Mayor, we anticipate that this will be policy given to us around which we would craft the plan. So things like the budgets for and which 5-year quartile each of the groups of projects would be in, what and how inflation might be applied to those budgets, the numbers that go with each of the categorical elements, and certainly maintenance, as you mentioned. But when I mentioned budgets at the beginning of my first comments there, that's a big word when we consider not just individual project budgets, but the inflation, how maintenance will be handled on each of them, and perhaps even when we would anticipate them being built.
Thank you, Tom. Now, I appreciate the fact that in your response, it seems, at least for me, helps to distinguish or differentiate some of the policy topics versus some of these framework guidelines. So thank you, Tom.
Mr. Chair, Mayor Winfield, just to add to Mr. McGovern's comments, the timeline that Paki shared with you earlier, we're anticipating the October meeting. We'll have that conversation and bring those details to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I would like to reiterate the work that our Citizens Advisory Committee members do as a voluntary work, and really appreciate the staff, Paki, for putting in the time and helping guide the committee. I 100% disagree with my dear colleague, Mayor Honey, in terms of what the purpose of the CAC is. Yes, absolutely. I believe that we are the policymakers. We do this in our own jurisdiction, and then we do this policy work here at the PAG and RTA board. But the value of what the Citizens Advisory Committee brings is just that, right? It is advice and feedback and input from the citizens of our region. And I am not about to tell them they're wrong. It is their input, it is their feedback. And I think that's the genius of what the RTA is, right? That it is the board of policymakers and that we have a technical management committee that will help us guide us through the money, the dollars and cents. And then of course that it's the Citizens Advisory Committee that will guide us, the policymakers, as to what the priorities are for the residents of our region. So I'm happy that we don't have to say, give our blessing to their priorities. I think they make sense, and I appreciate that they were updated to be able to add the voices of the new members in the committee and actualize what I think we had approved as the RTA board back in January 13th of 2020. It was approved by the previous CAC. And I'm glad that the chairman and the vice chairs really allowed for that discussion and that participation to bring the new addition, the revisions that were adopted by August 15th of this year. So it is part of that guidance, I think, that will help us move into how we, the policymakers, will create the pieces of how we want to invest our funds in. And I did notice, Chair McGovern, what you're talking about in terms of your priorities and how it reflects, some of the Title VI concerns that that we were talking about previously. Saying that, all of our voices are going to count in putting together that package for RTA Next, and I value that. As an aside, I had not seen the timeline that Paki shared with us just now. I would like for the board members to receive this timeline by email, please, so that we can prepare ourselves for what's coming. Some of this work takes a long time for us to be able to develop. And then there's some additional input, especially on the next two items regarding that timeline and how we make it work. The issues on item 9 and 10 and the timeline that we have in front of us. So that can Paki share that timeline?
Sure, Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, that timeline was sent out earlier in the month. Hopefully you all received it. We'll send it out again just in case if you
That would
have
be
not
great.
received it.
That would be great.
But I hope everybody else received my memo on the timeline, so we'll send it out again.
I don't know if there's a breakdown in communication happening. I don't know if PAG staff is not emailing other staff members in my
I'll
office.
check with Jackie on that.
It's happened previously, it's happened before. I would like to make sure
Of course, we'll
that
check on that. I think
communications are
Jackie's,
shared with our city manager, my chief of staff, so that I don't drop these important
and I'll
pieces
check
of
on it.
information.
But Jackie, please confirm that you do have multiple people at the city, right? Yes, we'll double check. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Two things stand out from the comments that we heard from Mr. McGovern and Ms. Campbell. The first was when Mr. McGovern referred to the revised framework as being more robust, and that robustness came out of the collaboration amongst the CAC members. And then I think Ms. Campbell also pointed out that the TMC's feedback helped to improve the final version that we see in front of us. So I appreciate that level of collaboration amongst the CAC and the TMC, because that's going to be even more critical moving forward. So those were the two things that really stood out, and just wanted to thank the two of you, as some of my colleagues have, for your leadership. I know that's been additionally challenging given the changed composition of the CAC.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just wanted a couple comments that kind of from around the table. One, on the timeline, I thought that was great for staff to have that timeline thrown out there. Remember, at the last board meeting, we kind of established something. We established the date we wanted a plan. We established the date we wanted them to be done, talking about the guidelines. And beyond that, the timeline, I think that Patty shared, gives us the most flexibility when we want to go to the ballot. So we have it all done by December. Now, depending how this plan comes together, the proof's going to be in the pudding. Because there will be some issues that are going to be, and Mayor Honey and Mayor Murphy gave some feedback on their concerns with the guidelines, which is really just that, it's feedback to let the CAC know, okay, just be aware that there's some concerns by some of the members of the board who ultimately will be approving the plan. And more importantly, as Mayor Honey mentioned, regionality is the key. This plan is going to have regional acceptance. That means it's going to have acceptance from all the municipalities, all the different entities, all the different concerns, and ultimately it's going to be a balance of those guiding principles of what they want. But what we will see over the next coming months, and it's a big challenge because July 23 will be here faster than we think, is going to be how they now take these guiding principles and have them play out over the things. I've talked with folks before, and if every guiding principle is being measured against every single project, they're never going to get there. They will not be ready in June. You've got to remember, those principles are for the package as a whole. When they look at the entirety of the RTA, they can go back and see if they accomplish those principles. But there are some projects that may only fill one of the goals on the back. I mean, and that's okay. That's part of putting together the package. The question I would have, Mr. Chair, is right now it looks like on that timeline, November, they were going to start having the prioritized lists. But the things that we do when it comes to policy, and we've told them we're going to give them, is we're going to give them buckets of money, budget, buckets of money, the breakdowns of where we see that element. In other words, where do we see the percentages being for the spending? Can they get to the point they need to be if our next meeting's in October? So what I'm going to ask for us to consider is perhaps holding a single topic meeting in September. Keyword single topic, and just on the information that we are required to get to the CAC so they can meet their goals. Difficulty is going to be scheduled, I understand, and Mr. Chair, it's your discretion to call that, but we may need to consider doing that, or that first goal of they've got on November is going to be really difficult to meet.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Mr. Maxwell, as Mr. McGovern mentioned, they're putting together a couple of working groups, and the working groups are going to do some of this work before we can bring it to you. The TMC is also anticipating a workshop in September, and they want to bring some recommendations to you. So my recommendation is let's get that information to you in October. Otherwise, we're not getting information from those committees to you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Morgami, appreciate that. I guess what I'd say, ask the CAC chairs, is if there's information that's slowing you down that we've told you we're going to give you, because we're going to have the discussions on the buckets, we're going to have the discussions on the breakdown of the budget, we're going to have the discussions on the maintenance, on the policy issues. So if as you're going through your process, if you find that you're being held up because of lack of information from us, I'd appreciate you getting that back to the executive director so we can then discuss if we have to do anything different than what we currently have.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Maxwell, be happy to do that. We'll stay on top of it. Again, I anticipate that we'll have all of that to you at the October meeting, and all the information that's going to feed into the process. I think even in September, if we didn't have all these other committees going on, we still don't have some of the information we're working on, especially we're doing an update on our revenue projections. That's not going to be available until October, and that's going to be a critical piece as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. That's why I really think the timeline is important, because if the RTA board is going to be asked to make decisions in the October meeting that we're not quite ready for, it might be a good idea to gather, even if it's at the end of September, to hash out whatever we need to hash out so that we can stay on timeline. Yeah, I don't think that waiting till the end of October will help us. But I also understand that if you don't have specific information, then we can't make too many decisions. So as long as there is flexibility in moving to another meeting, maybe in November, so when we have the initial meeting, when we have a clearer picture, then we're not asked to make absolute decisions in the October meeting. I just want to make sure that we have that flexibility because there's still a lot of unanswered questions.
Of course, Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, but definitely, again, once we have the information, at your pleasure, we can meet as often as you want. So my only hesitation was we don't have the information until October. Past October, we can meet as often as you like.
Any other questions? I personally wanted to thank you both. I know you went through a transition phase and all that with some new members and all that. And that's always tough. It's always tough, and you've weathered and you've put up with a lot of things that, and the region puts and throws at you. And I thank every single member of the CAC to, like we're hoping it would work out and be patient. And I saw some of the emails that were going back and forth. And I just prayed that, sooner or later, your team comes together because it's very critical and vital. It is the voice of the people out there in every single region of their representation. And I appreciate that a lot. So whatever we can do to help you, not hinder you, I think that's what we need to do. And we do appreciate every single thought and minute that you spend trying to get the best for our region. So I believe Mr. Scott had something to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I neglected to say this in my earlier comments, and going back to the points that both Mayor Honey and General Maxwell made about the importance of regionality. Although I do very much appreciate the level of collaboration that certainly has occurred within the CAC and between the CAC and the TMC, when there is thoughtful input from two member jurisdictions, as there was from Marana and Sahuarita, I hope that time will be devoted during an upcoming CAC meeting to discuss their input, and if decided by the CAC, to incorporate some of the concerns from those two member jurisdictions.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, sir.
Supervisor Scott, happy to do that. And I haven't had the opportunity to see those comments yet, but certainly if there indeed are more comments from other jurisdictions or individuals on the board, happy to receive those, and we'll make a full report to the CAC when we meet.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments?
I'd like to let the CAC know also that we appreciate all the work that they've been doing. It's going to take time. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but it's going to take time to get the group to meld, I think, into what we anticipate will be an overall better sense of regionality that's going to be developed because of the changes that have occurred for the past year. So I just want to thank you. I think you're doing a good job. It's not going to be easy, but I appreciate everything that you're done thus far.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I certainly agree with the emphasis on the regional approach. I don't want the community to think that that's not part of the framework, because as I look at the framework, it says should prioritize regionally significant transportation needs and focus on regional projects, must enhance the regional transportation system's overall efficiency and then contribute to a variety of elements. So I think personally, I think the CAC certainly does see the importance of approaching this from a regional standpoint. And the fact that the CAC is representative of the region as a whole, I think also underscores the fact that that this is a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or anything to break up or?
Just very short, just wanted to, I love having the CAC chair and vice chairs being part of our discussion and presentation to us. I would highly encourage that we always have them here, Mr. Chair, and also the chairs of the Technical Management Committee, which I know you usually sit over there on that side, but would love to also have them be part of the discussion, the conversation at this table, because we all bring our different perspectives, and that's what makes the RTA such a special thing, right? It is one of the best things that have happened to our region. It's being able to bring the different perspectives and different experiences and different needs to the table so that we can have the best possible package to present to all of our communities. So it's been a great conversation. Thank you all for your volunteer time to improve our community and in our region. Really appreciate it.
Any other comments or any? Thank you. Gracias. Muchísimas
Gracias.
gracias. There's mucho cortesía in my language.
Mr. Chair, get a break. Little 5-minute break.
5-minute break. Is that okay with everybody?
Anyone?
We turn over.
I can go on my own, but
You don't have a line in yours.
Then we'll move on. 5-minute break.
I always advocate for it.
Actually,
Maybe.
on the agenda, number 9.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the RTA Board. This is our continuing discussion about cost to complete the RTA remaining projects, our mandates and legal requirements. In terms of just going where we, what we've seen, we have in the 2022 to 2026 RTA tip. We developed it during the pandemic. We used some very conservative revenue estimates for regional funding. We're finding that we now have collections that are exceeding that. So we have some funds that we can commit to new projects. However, or not new projects, but our projects that are in need of funding. We also have observed that costs have climbed at a greater rate than the revenue increases. And we'll get into that in a little more detail in a moment. We also have a request or a recommendation from the Auditor General that we go out more frequently. They knew that we were doing this gap analysis. They're recommending that we reinforce that with coming out more frequently with requests for updated costs, summarizing them and comparing them to the funds available. In response to that, we did on June 6th, send a letter to all of our jurisdictions, lead agencies, asking them to provide updated cost estimates and identify all other local revenues that might be available. We also have requested that they provide us comprehensive financial reporting of actual expenditures on RTA projects, and that is due by September 30th. So they've had the opportunity to reconcile all of their fiscal year end costs. Anyway, we hope to have this finalized in terms of all RTA funding requests, or I'm sorry, all RTA funding information at the October meeting. In terms of things that, oh, whoops. Okay, now I'm going too fast with this. We have observed that the construction cost increase have exceeded the CPI. Some things we're looking at right now. First of all, the Engineering News Record, the Twin City construction cost estimate is up about 27% since 2016. The ENR CCI, as we refer to it, is mentioned in a lot of our jurisdictions. Impact fees as a benchmark or a measure that adjusts impact fees. It's something that we look to across the nation. It's a bundle of labor and products, and it's a pretty good index to look at. What it doesn't capture is fuel and bitumen prices as well as it could. That is something that has spiked since the onset of the war in Eastern Europe. And certainly we've also seen some local challenges with concrete, cement particularly being in short supply, and other materials. I know oddly, we all know that our metal pipe materials, ductile iron and whatnot, are affected by the lack of pig iron coming from Ukraine. These are things that have been influencing prices recently. One of the things that we've looked at is a number of different indices to kind of see where we're going. And we start this in 2016, in part because that's when ADOT started tracking their own construction cost index, and we're referring to that. And it also is representative of kind of a high water point in RTA project delivery, where we were still looking at a lot of projects coming in under budget or near budget as we had been seeing them bid. So this shows a reflection of different indices. First, the blue line is the ADOT construction cost index, and you can see that it's really jumped up substantially in the last year. It's showing basically 88% in growth in costs on projects since 2016. Interestingly, 88%. Yeah. Interestingly, our revenues is the next line up. We're up 47% in our RTA TPT collection over that same period of time. You go down to the next line at 27%, that's where the engineering news record cost index is at. So the national costs are not as, those index or those costs have not increased at the rate they have locally here in Arizona, and particularly on the roadway projects. The construction cost index actually covers a broader group of projects. Below that, at 20% growth is actually the Bureau of Labor Statistics CPI, change CPI since 2016. That's gone up 20%. And one of the things that we track and utilize here also is the GDP, the change GDP. That's how we assign or identify the maintenance of effort contributions that our jurisdictional partners make to RTA to deliver transit services. So that's identified in statute, and that is only 17% growth in that same period of time. Looking at one of the big things that we're all concerned with, and I know you all see it as you're dealing with your roadway rehabilitation programs. The cost of bitumen or the asphalt binder, if you will, that we're using in our road products. That's really gone sky high since the war in Ukraine began, and you can see, it really started to climb after January of this year. It's gone up to roughly about $750 per ton. Compare that back to when we had the last big spike in oil prices was June of 2012. In that time frame, when it hit $606 a ton. So other than that, for most of the last 10 years or so, though, it's been hovering in around $400 a ton. So it's a big jump that's noticed. The other thing that you can see is the current price of diesel. Now, this is red diesel, diesel that it does not have the highway taxes added to it. So this is what the cost of construction or the diesel used in construction is priced at, and that peaked basically in about July, and it has started to fall. So we are seeing that, and in general, we are seeing a lot of volatility in the oil markets right now. West Texas Intermediate's about $80. It had been well over 110-ish. So we are starting to see a retreat on that. We've not yet seen that in construction prices, but it is something that we need to be aware of as we're perhaps seeing as we look to the future, what kind of inflation we might expect. Are we looking at it continuing to grow at this rapid rate, or perhaps level off, or even retreat a little bit? It's unclear to us at this point in time, and really, absent a really precise Ouija board, I'm not going to be able to give you very much information on that. So, but that's something that I think we need to be watching. So as we look at the construction cost estimates that I'm going to be presenting to you now, we're looking at them in our current latest estimate. We have not added any inflation for future years yet. I know we have received recommended numbers that are based on year of construction and inflation accrued to that. We've not shown that on here. We don't have confidence in those numbers, and I think the best thing for us to do at this point in time is to present current dollars and compare them to current dollars. This is the latest version of our funding needs analysis. We have broken the Tangerine Road project up into two sub-projects. The one that's going to construction here in the next year or so, that the town of Marana is working quickly to get out. And in fact, you can see some of the preliminary work along the corridor already. And then we have a second phase that's further out that has yet to go into final design. We have the Silver Bell Road phase 2 or stage 2. That project is going to fully consume the remaining funds within that category, and then we'll need to be looking at some additional funding if we're if the budget or if the estimates are proving to match up with the ultimate bids. Silver Bell Road, Stage 3, that's the one that Camino del Cerro de Aina. That, if you'll recall, we deferred to RTA Next. That's a project that we had estimated previously at $58 million for the 3-lane version, and 68-ish, I think, was what the 4-lane desired version was. We put that on hold to push that into RTA Next. Sunset Road at $39.4 million. We provided the funding to ADOT. The check's been written. They're moving into bidding presently. First Avenue, Orange Grove to Ina. If we were to widen that to the 4 lanes that was in the scope, we were looking at, I think, a little over $11 million, $11.5 million was what the estimate that we'd been carrying most recently. We've put that to 0. It actually returns the $6.556 million that's in the plan, the current plan. And if we don't move forward with it, that money then would freeze up. First Avenue, we're showing it at $83.4 million. That's the cost, the most recent team cost that is associated with a 4-lane road, not a 6-lane road. So it shows it does not include the additional right-of-way needed for the 6-lane divided. It is a divided roadway. There is a modest allocation to drainage in there. I know there are other drainage concerns that need to be looked at, but that's what we've allocated to the project in this estimate. Union Pacific Railroad, that really, we're just looking at updated forecasts based upon the latest numbers. And we do have Mr. Ellis, who is in the room here. He joins, he participates in all the project team meetings that he can. And so he's keeping tabs on what the latest information is. So he helps us validate these costs. And then Grant Road, we're carrying that currently at a construction cost for Stage 3. That's the project that's impending. It's 100% estimate as of April. Ready to bid at $52.78 million is what we're carrying in this now. Continuing on, these are projects that are a little further out, some of them anyway. We have the final phase, stages 5 and 6 of Grant Road. We're looking at about just under $90 million based upon 30% plans. That has been the 30% plans in September were escalated, representing the most recent inflation that's been experienced. We're carrying now $155.7 million on the 22nd Street viaduct over the railroad track. We're grateful, and we are showing in this now the funds associated with the raise grant. So we congratulate the city on that. That's helping, but it's still a big project, and right now we're showing a fairly large number for it. We still have another phase beyond that on 22nd Street that has no funding available on. That would be the 22nd Street Stage 3 project from I-10 to Kima Boulevard. The next 3 projects are really kind of, those are projects that don't have, they have fairly broad scopes, allowing us to basically build to the budget. So we have shown no funding need on the Valencia I-19 to Alvernon access safety and intersection modifications project. Irvington Road, we've got that going forward with ADOT right now. We are contributing to the work that they're doing, and they will be doing work outside of the interchange proper to tie into the rest of the system. And then we have aviation, the Barraza Aviation Corridor that has funding for right-of-way. And again, that's at the amount that's in the ballot. Going down to the bottom of the page, back into projects that have scopes that are defined that we're trying to meet with the estimated costs. We're showing $37.2 million on Valencia Road, Cold Houghton. 22nd Street, we're showing almost $30 million on that. That's the latest estimate for that. Continuing on down, we do have Harrison Road, Gulf Links to Irvington. Current cost estimate on that is $9.6 million, but that's only for a single standalone bridge. That's not including the desired widening and additional bridge span. So I know that's something that has been identified in the city of Tucson's list of projects for RTA next. RTA 32 Houghton Road, this is stage 7, the Irvington to 22nd Street project. Latest estimate that we have on that is for $60.4 million. It's highlighted in part because we've had this ongoing discussion about the fact that part of this is an enhanced scope and that the city would contribute the delta, if you will, for the cost of the additional improvements. We've not nailed down that cost yet. It's out there. It's something we need to be mindful of as we're continuing with the conversations here. Houghton Road, I-10 to Tanque Verde. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the stage 8, the Broadway to Tanque Verde phase is currently pegged at $55.3 million. The funds that are shown in there, the 7.326 million, that is funding that's all local funding at this point that's shown in the tip. We will have exhausted all of the RTA funds on the stage 7 component of the project. And then downtown links, we're showing a contribution amount of $17.5 additional million based upon the most recent plans or most recent work package guaranteed maximum price that was presented to us. We talked about that and continued this item at the last meeting. So that'll be the subject of the next agenda item. In sum, we're looking at about $875 million worth of project costs. We've got in the tip $513 million. These projects are fully loaded, so they do include the utility costs that will be we'll need to be looking to our utility agencies to, at least the wet utilities, to cover part of that cost. So we're looking at currently a funding need of just under $318 million. We've identified, and this is a soft number, this is going to change. We're going to be coming back to you next month, or next meeting, with an updated revenue or available funding forecast. We're showing right now $176.8 million in kind of our baseline. Again, that's Eller's estimate and some estimates that we did at the beginning of the pandemic for other regional funds. We also have a more optimistic estimate of almost $219 million. We'll be looking at these and coming back to you with recommendations on that at the next meeting. So that's where we stand in terms of the current funding needs analysis, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? Mr. Chair and Mr. Benavides, this is when I was going to ask the question about the tip that I asked about during the regional council meeting. Mr. DeGrood, there was recently a meeting of the Transportation Planning Committee / TIP Subcommittee in which there was discussion with you and Mr. Brown and the subcommittee members about direction that the two of you had gotten in terms of setting aside other regional funds during fiscal year 2027 and fiscal year 2028. I wonder if you could just give us a summary of that discussion, and then I had a couple of questions.
Sure. Mr. Chair, Supervisor Scott, we have been operating on the assumption that the direction given to us earlier in the year by the RTA board was to come back with a plan that begins to address these gaps. in funding and look at all sources of funds to be able to do that. One of the sources of funds is the other regional funding that will be made available to us beyond the current RTA plan. One of the things that I look at on this is the amount of projects that we've got in this plan that remain to be delivered. $878 million, I think I said. That is a lot of work. Over the prior 15 years, I don't think we've done that much work in 15 years, much less the coming 4. So we expect that there will be, I think it will make sense to look at potentially utilizing these future funds to help meet that need, as well as look at the funds that may be available through RTA Next. So our recommendation and what was put into the direction that went out with the development of the tip for the next period, which runs from 2024 to 2028, was to make the transit funding that we can only use on transit available for our call for projects, but to hold back unprogrammed the 27 and 28 regional funds. We have the ability to program them in the future at any time. We don't have a mandate to program them now. Let's keep our powder dry, so to speak. And that's been the approach we've taken with that, and that's our recommendation now.
If I could continue, Mr. Chair, and I think the confusion that was expressed to me by our jurisdictional representative, and perhaps some of my colleagues heard the same from their representatives to the TPC and TIP subcommittee, was that this is similar to what the regional council voted to do in 2014, where the decision was made to devote all regional funds to the completion of RTA projects. There were several references made during the meeting to a vote that this board had made in January of 2022 that inferred or implied that direction to set aside for now the fiscal year 2027 and fiscal year 2028 regional funds. But that vote doesn't explicitly address those regional funds. Now, I know I watched the recording of that meeting, and I know you said, well, if this is not as explicit as the TPC is hoping to get, perhaps we can get additional clarification and specificity from the RTA board. Could you summarize for us some of the concerns that were shared with you by the TPC members?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Scott, I know that the TPC would like to be actively involved in the programming of those funds. We have heard commentary from a number of jurisdictions that they'd like to be able to access those funds in the future. Our position is that is or position that we've been conveying to them is that that's ultimately the board's decision. At this point in time, we're recommending that we retain flexibility in funding those so that we can address these needs that are emerging. I know there's an interest in trying to take the current year funding that may be available and delegate it to specific projects. I would caution against that, in that at this point in time, we haven't seen bid results, and it would be better for us to meet those funds out on projects as they are ripe, if you will, as the projects go to bid, and as we know what those dollar gaps are that need to be met. So that would be my recommendation. And I think that's what, if that isn't what was on the recording, that was what I'd hoped would have been on that recording, because that was the intent that I was trying to convey.
I think the TPC members were just trying to get a sense of specifically how the board had given that direction, since fiscal year 2027 and 2028 regional funds were not mentioned in that vote. They wondered where that was coming from, and the response that I heard from you and Mr. Brown was that was staff's interpretation based on what they considered to be the board's inferences or implications. And I don't want to belabor this point, but what I've shared with Mr. Mogimi is that if staff is going to go to jurisdictional representatives and say, this is our inference or implication of what we think the RTA board intended when they cast that vote, then we should know that. We should know that before you go to jurisdictional representatives and share those inferences or implications. I recognize, and again, I listened to the meeting, I recognize that staff feel that they have a statutory responsibility to assure compliance. I get that. But for me to hear about this first from the representative of Pima County to TPC, instead of hearing about it from Mr. Mogimi and staff, I felt it spoke to both issues of communication not just with the jurisdictional representatives, but with the board. And I thought it also spoke to the need for understanding the importance that jurisdictional representatives attach to their role in these processes. And one of the points that was shared with me is that when the regional council voted in 2014 to devote all regional funds to completing RTA projects, these funds were still included in notices of funding availability, and there were TIP policy changes implemented that required RTA projects to be prioritized. A lot of these folks were serving back then, they're serving now, and they wondered why the change was made. And it was uncomfortable for me to not be able to share the rationale for that. So what I shared with Mr. Mogimi and what I want to share with my colleagues is just like we requested earlier, some updates on the transit contract that we just passed and whether the vendor is meeting their obligations. When staff is going to go before jurisdictional representatives and represent what they consider to be the inference or implication of a board action, I think the board should know about that in advance so that we can respond to questions that come up from our jurisdictional representatives. Because at least for me, they certainly came up in this instance, and I wasn't prepared to answer them.
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Scott, the point well taken. Obviously, again, the TIP process is so dynamic that things change on a regular basis. And we just talked about revenue changing, expenditures changing. So the beginning of that process, and we've had this conversation, but it's obviously for everybody's benefit to recognize that the beginning of that process typically starts with saying, we're going to start developing the TIP, and it takes 10 months to do it. So at some point, we need to say, these are things that we know as of today, and these are things that we need to bring to the table later on. And again, in this case, I believe the letter was clear enough to say that we need to hold fiscal year 27 and 28 until a decision is made. But point well taken, we need to continue to have that conversation and make a decision. And that decision, you can make that decision in October, which is what my hope is, to make that decision in October. If not, you have time. You can go all the way through next April and make that decision. Our recommendation is to make that decision sooner so the committees can start getting to work and start deciding what to do with those funds. So the point, again, well taken. Let everybody know what we think is happening, what's coming out. And the NOFA is typically for the technical folks, but in the future, we'll make sure we'll copy the regional council, RTA board, so you get the same information, perhaps earlier or at the same time.
No, I appreciate that because again, when a jurisdictional representative comes to me as the county's representative on the RTA board and says, where is this coming from? And I'm not able to answer that question. I just think it's good I don't think you can ever over communicate on matters like this. And I think the entire board would appreciate that advance notice when staff is going to share with jurisdictional representatives that this is staff's interpretation of a board action.
Well, point well taken. We'll do that. But I want to make sure everybody knows that we need to make that decision
Yes.
sooner than later. We will come to you with that information. And if you go back to, you don't have to pull up your slide. We know we're in the $100 million to $150 million range. So how do we fill that gap? And this is an attempt to identify options to fill that gap.
So, Mr. Mogimi, Mr. DeGrood, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, while I have the floor, can I bring up something else related to this item? And it goes back to our previous meeting. So at our previous meeting, and Mr. DeGrood went through this when he was going through the various RTA projects. The board took action to move 2 projects to RTA next. The county's First Avenue project and a project that is shared by the county and the town of Marana on Silver Bell Road, and Mr. DeGrood had those highlighted on his spreadsheet. Mayor Romero spoke very strongly, very specifically at the last meeting about the need for mayor and council and also City of Tucson staff to have input into which, if any, current RTA projects within the City of Tucson should be moved to RTA next. And as we know, after the action taken at our last meeting, all of the remaining projects are City of Tucson projects. I followed up after that meeting with an email to all of you, and I'm just going to read really briefly from the end of that email. It said, I was also encouraged by the prospect of Mayor Romero and her team meeting with Mr. Mogimi and his team in advance of our August 25 meeting to determine if there are any City of Tucson projects that can be moved to RTA next. With the action we took, all remaining projects are City of Tucson projects. As Mayor Romero stated, it is most appropriate that she and city staff play a pivotal role in those discussions. And my hope was that we would have some kind of proposal to present to the rest of us at this meeting as to which, if any, RTA projects, current RTA projects within the city are going to be considered for RTA next. So I have 2 questions. What happened between our last meeting and now with regard to those discussions between PAG staff and city staff? And what's the plan moving forward to determine which, if any, current RTA projects within the city could be considered for RTA next?
Sure, Mr. Chair, Supervisor Scott, thank you again for that review. I did follow up after that discussion as well with city staff, and we did eventually have a meeting to discuss that. It was more of a kind of a high level, tentatively, that how do we get there? How can we get there? Obviously, the desire of the board was to have input from the city. My takeaway from that conversation was that city staff would like to have input from city council. And I believe that is the intent, to get input from city council before we can bring something back to you. And that's why we don't have anything at this meeting. My hope still is to be able to do that at the October meeting. I'm sorry, I forgot your second question. The second question was?
The second question is,
when will we bring it?
What's the plan moving forward? I mean, we don't have a proposal at this meeting, which was certainly my hope at the end of our last meeting. So what's the plan moving forward? And I might also pose that question to my colleague, because I know that Mayor and Council discussed this issue last night.
On Tuesday,
my bad.
Absolutely, if I may. The numbers that you saw today, the revised numbers for the projects, this is the first time that I've seen them. And these numbers had not been shared to transportation and mobility staff or our city manager. This is the first time we all see them, I believe, right? So because we had a different set of numbers than what we saw today, we have not been able to move forward in terms of how to prioritize the projects, especially those that are on the hopper. We're going to talk about that next with the Downtown Links project, not until recently, until this particular agenda was made available to all of us, did we see that there was an additional $10 million available for downtown links? So there was a lot of issues regarding funding up in the air. And so without being able to have actual numbers and how much money is available for the end of the RTA, then those informed decisions cannot be made by staff or mayor and council. I can't sit here and tell you, well, these are my priorities, because we need to make sure that council is part of that conversation. And as I said, these numbers, these current numbers, which I appreciate, look differently than what we had been looking at before. There we are. We're in August, and unfortunately, because we didn't have this information before, we have not been able to have a thorough discussion. We did, as you said, have a conversation as mayor and council about RTA and the possibility of RTA next. There's a lot of questions, as you might have heard or must imagine. Some concerns about being able to complete the First Avenue project is a huge concern from one of my colleagues, and I imagine all of us on the council. But what we did decide to do is invite Mr. Mogini to come to our September, I believe, 13th meeting, so that he can present these numbers, talk to our colleagues on the council about this new reality, correct? Because the last time that Mr. Mogini was at the council and presented and talked about the projects that the city of Tucson has pending, we all heard on the record that we were still using 2006 estimates, and that the projects were fully funded. So this particular situation presents a completely different story and different numbers. So we have to do it together. I think it's important for our city manager, our Department of Transportation Mobility Director, and my colleagues on the council to weigh the options, look at the new numbers that we've seen today, and take it from there.
Thank you, Mayor Romero. So, Mr. Chair, if I could follow up. So, Mr. Mogini, so that we can stay on track, and because what you heard from city staff was that they wanted decisions to be made by mayor and council, do you need any kind of action or direction from this board in terms of following up with mayor and council in September?
No, Mr. Chair, Supervisor Scott. I'm not sure if there's any additional action is required. The discussion back in June was very helpful. The target back in June was $100 million. And as you can see today, the target hasn't changed. It's still $100 million worth of projects, that the solution at the time was, can we identify projects to move to RTA next? So that hasn't changed. We've had this conversation with other folks about, okay, what if the numbers are higher? Let's be more conservative. Okay, let's say 150. So 100 to 150, which is what you can see on the presentation. And that number hasn't changed. We've talked about 100 to 150 for the last 9 months. That's been, if you go back and look at all the memos I provided, that has been the range of funding needs that we're looking at. Again, the assumption is that, okay, what do you do if a project goes to construction in 24? And as Jim mentioned, let's start by using current numbers. So the current numbers updated based on jurisdictional update, which we've received. So all this information is from staff, from the city and the county and everybody else, and Marana, to make sure we have the updated costs to complete all these projects. So the information is coming from them. Jim is doing a good job working with Rick to make sure that we're all on the same page. And as Jim mentioned earlier, the only place that we believe that we want to make sure to reserve some room in the future is that what happens if this trend starts going back down where it should go. And ideally, we hope that it's going to start flattening out or potentially go back down. So if you look at the diagram, it's really telling. And Jim touched on it. 2017 and before 2017, everything was coming in within budget, under budget. from 2017 on, that's where we're seeing this increase in cost. I've talked to many people, even ADOT folks. Nobody can really explain why this is happening, but everybody's hopeful that it's going to stop and it's going to start trending back down. So based on the current numbers we have, I'm still asking for a target of $100 to $150 million to move to RTA next as part of the solution to fill that gap.
And if I may jump in as well, the issues about reaching agreement with these numbers between the RTA staff and the city of Tucson staff. And so that's what has to happen. I don't think we can make it here, and I would refuse to make it here because I'm not an engineer and I don't, have the knowledge to be able to do this. But I would like to invite our city manager. I don't know if you'd like to include anything to the conversation, Mr. Ortega?
Sure.
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Everybody okay with that? Board? All right, go ahead.
This is the proper spot. So thank you for the opportunity. And I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate being here to listen to it. I think the bottom line is recognizing agreement, if you will, on what the shortfall is. And I think that where my concern lies, quite frankly, is in us agreeing as a team on what that shortfall is. I did not know or did not realize that the $27, $28 were an option. And you discussed that earlier. When we met with the city, with the RTA staff, that was brought up, and I thought, great. That is an additional source of revenue. So if you think about the numbers, if in fact it's 100 million, and I understood it was 150, but if it's 100 million, right? And that revenue is in the 60 to 70 range, the shortfall is only $30 million or $40 million. That's a lot different than having a conversation around $150 million shortfall. And so I think that taking all of those resources, putting them on the table and putting them into the mix is extremely important. And I think that's where there is not understanding or agreement, because quite frankly, some of those pieces are future dollars. I recognize we don't have a crystal ball, right? And we can't necessarily project out what inflation is going to do and those kinds of things. But somehow we have to factor those in to the conversation. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I don't feel like I have the authority, nor does Mayor Romero. I mean, has a lot of authority, but to make a recommendation on which projects move forward. And so what I suggested is we really need to get it queued up for a conversation with mayor and council, because some of the suggested projects to move are very important to some of the council members. North First Avenue is one. I think you may have been copied on a letter from Council Member Dahl. I know that one of the projects that's potentially interested in moving, or the RTA staff's interested in moving, is 22nd Street on the east side of town. Extremely important to council members up there, both Councilmember Lee and Councilmember Cunningham. And so rather than just saying, yeah, we're going to move it, we really need to think about it in terms of what the council recommendation is. And if there are solutions like future dollars, I think there's an opportunity to say, hey, we can't deliver it through 26, but maybe through 28. It's a different conversation, as you may have heard me say. I think it's there's a big difference in the conversation with the voter to say we can deliver, we just can't deliver in this time frame. It's going to be in this time frame, versus we're going to take those projects and move them into another program. And once we have specificity or agreement on that, then I think the conversation becomes a little clearer and a little easier, if you will, for folks to have. Mayor, turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Also, the other piece is what are the projects that we have either near completion or in the process of, or are ready to go, versus which are the projects that are were supposed to be built in the 24, 26 period of the RTA and are nowhere near. So once we have clarity in terms of the money that we have and the projects that we have in line and which ones can move now, I think that the answer to this is going to be much more clear. And I don't know if we can get, that's why the timeline that we saw earlier that Paqui had in front of us, I don't know if we could get there and start making decisions on the RTA next if one particular jurisdiction doesn't have answers in terms of what we have, what's our budget and what we can do. And then of course, the work that we need to do with all of the council colleagues and the projects that they would potentially have to comply with having to move.
Mr. Chair, I thank you and thank my colleagues for letting me take up so much time. And thank you to Mayor Romero and Mr. Ortega for their input. I just had one last question, and I'm going to direct it to Mr. Mogimi, just because I think it's something that's important to restate. It came up at the last meeting, but I think it's important to restate in the context of this conversation. Are we giving direction to the CAC that if there are projects like the two that have already been voted on being moved to RTA next, that they should be front loaded? In other words, they should be considered at the front of the line.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, Supervisor Scott, that is my understanding of the conversation we had back in January, that if this board decides to move any projects to RTA next, it will be in the plan and it will be in the first period of the plan. That's the board's decision and the CAC will have to comply.
And we would also make that really clear to
Member
mayor and council
jurisdiction.
during this September meeting.
Again, I believe it's been clear, but I'll do my best to make sure everybody understands that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Well, and I'd also like to incorporate, Mr. Chair and council members, the thing I'd like to also to remind people, also part of that was that those projects would be separate from what we call the RTA Next projects. Yes, they're going to be part of RTA Next, but remember, there's a year to a year and a half that we are overlapping, and there's not overlap on funding. It's that once the vote is in, it's over, and 6 months later, with the date that it's effective, it's now we're RTA Next. But so those wouldn't count towards the overall thing, but it's also something that when we give the buckets to the CAC, we've got to have in, because that's gonna be the first money off the pot. And now we're gonna start giving them buckets on the remaining, whatever the estimate is. I appreciate the mayor and council inviting the executive director to speak to him. But I really believe that there's a couple things that have to be agreed upon before he does it. And one is, what is the money that we've got? You can't make a budget if you're only looking at your expenses, unless you're looking at your revenues. So both we have to have good numbers before you go in that the city understands is the revenues that are available to the city to complete or to the RTA to complete the rest of the projects, which all happen to be in the city. And then the other one is the agreement on what the expenses are. Now, I'm sure the city's got estimations too, and I think it'd be helpful if you could compare them. They may be closer than we think. I mean, obviously, there were some numbers in there that they may not be as far off as we think. And then at that point, it doesn't matter if the city wants to consider their numbers. If it says instead of 100 million shortfall, we're showing 150 million shortfall. Okay, that's establishing what the projects are going to have to move, and it gives you an opportunity. Thing I cautious as we're moving projects, language matters. Looks no further than the 10 emails we got regarding Silver Belt.
Yeah.
The PAG, the RTA's abandoned Silver Belt. They're not going to do any of those projects. In the January motion, we committed to getting those projects done. I think that's part of why you see the 27, 28 money kind of holding, because if RTA Next doesn't pass, are we going to say all those ones from RTA 1 we're not going to complete? No, my opinion as a member of this board is I would be pushing towards we still owe that to the voters to complete. And that may require using the 27, 28 money. So I understand why we're kind of hanging that in limbo. But we need to make sure we're on point on messaging. That is, these projects will be front loaded. And my understanding is what the day that RTA Next would become effective, we can go out and bond for the money that's required to finish those projects. And so that is, if we do move them, they're not abandoned. They're not going to be considered. They're going to get done. And it may be done faster than if it doesn't pass and we have to use that 27, 28, 29 money, because we can bond for that money with the new thing. And Executive Director, I don't know if you can, I could be butchering the actual process, but we've got to remember wording and language matters. Because people are thinking that by moving these projects, we're abandoning them. That's not the case. We're doing it so that we can complete them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Maxwell, I appreciate that comment because we even have some committee members at the TPC level, at the TMC level, that they're asking clarifications for what it all means. And we'll definitely make sure that we clarify all that. My understanding is that this board has committed to finish all RTA projects in the current plan. And that's our mission. That's going to be our focus. How do we finish it? I have solutions. I'll be happy to bring that to you in October meeting if you like, or a later meeting. But you've already begun that process by moving 2 projects. And I want to comment on that because that is completely within your right. As a governing board, you have authority to do that. The statute supports that. Obviously, it's a conversation with the community. What is the reasoning for that? And the reasoning for that is exactly what we talked about. Cost increases are just unprecedented. Nobody can explain why, but we're still committed to deliver those projects. We're going to deliver those projects. Now, whether it's in 25 or 26 or 27, that's a discussion we want to have with the community. If a project has not even begun planning process, regardless of where the funding source is, you're still looking at 3, 4, 5 years before you deliver that project. So it shouldn't make a difference where the flavor of the money is coming from. It could be current RTA, next RTA, federal, state, local. My understanding is your commitment and your charge for me is to deliver these projects. And if I'm asking for any other direction from you, I want to know if there's anything else that you want me to do other than deliver these projects.
Anything else?
I don't understand what that question means.
Supervisor Scott asked, do I need a direction on this item? I believe.
That was it. Pardon me for interrupting. That was in reference to whatever you may need to have an effective and productive meeting with mayor and council in September.
Appreciate that, but I take that into the context of the coming up with a solution. I think I have the direction I need from you to come up with a solution, and we'll continue to work towards that.
Mr. Chair, I just piggyback. I'd ask the executive director to make sure that the numbers that shared with us today, and the city as much disclosure as you can have as well, get those numbers, take a look at the 2. We know there's gonna be a couple projects, there's still discrepancies on what's covered and what's not.
Yes.
That's gonna have to work out no matter what we do. But those are the projects that I believe the city wants to get done in now. They're not gonna be the ones that has come back from mayor and council to slide into the next RTA next. But have that interaction so that when you do present, it won't become an argument about the numbers. It'll be a discussion about why this makes sense as a solution.
Absolutely.
So along those lines again, Mr. Chair, Mr. Maxwell, I think Jim and Rick are doing their best to check numbers, match numbers. It's a moving target. I would even suggest we'll take whoever's number and say, all right, maybe it's more conservative, maybe it's higher. We'll use that number. That's fine. At the end of the day, the solutions don't change. The solutions are still the same. So at this point, we're recommending 100 to 150 million. If it's 200, we still have to come up with a solution for $200 million.
I agree with you, if I may, Mr. Chair. I agree with you that the sooner the city of Tucson Transportation and Mobility and you all get together so that we can come up with this is the cost. And this is what we have. And so now we have to make the decision as to what it's going to make it much easier to be able to be in agreement when you come and present to mayor and council. So if it's the 13th, we could do it then. If it's the second meeting in September, we could do it then. But I would highly recommend that you all get your heads together and be able to at least agree as much as we possibly can to what the costs are of the projects, so that we can come to the table and say, hey, this is the issue, this is the problem, and be able to at least have those steps out of the way so that we can try and resolve and abide by that timeline that we all want to abide by.
Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, appreciate that. We'll do that. So as I mentioned earlier, the only thing that may change on our side at this point is the revenue projections. We're trying to get new updates on the revenue. That'll happen in October. Again, as I mentioned, the cost estimates on the cost side, we feel comfortable where it is, but we'll be happy to bump them up as desired to be more conservative with the cost. So I think we're almost there. Really, the question that hopefully everybody will be asking is moving projects and which projects, and as a board, are you willing to put that down as the solution? RTA Next is a solution. New revenue from RTA Next is a solution. And I believe we already have that direction, but if anything, I want to reaffirm that RTA Next is part of the solution.
Any other questions? Comments? We were asking for no action required there.
No action required.
Just, okay, thank you.
But we do certainly have some marching orders from this conversation, correct?
I think yeah. All right, thank you. We'll move on to item 10.
Okay, Mr. Chair, this one, I'm going to be asking for action on. And that is that we are asking for direction to authorize the executive director to execute an intergovernmental agreement amendment between the RTA and the city of Tucson for supplemental funding on RTA number 16 Downtown Links project. As we had an agenda item in June that identified a recommendation for $7 million of additional funding based upon our analysis. Subsequent to that, we received information on the most recent work package, which also was quite a bit higher than we had anticipated and planned. The additional costs are eligible. So we are amending our recommendation to $17.5 million as the maximum amount funding that the RTA would contribute to that project.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we allocate $17.5 million of RTA funding to add to the $4 million the city of Tucson impact fees to complete the Downtown Links project.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Move on to number 11. On favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? I'll be an aye. I like the conversation.
You're an A, we're in trouble.
You might make my
I'll get you
appointment.